across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to talk about today, including why on earth and how on earth those vandals got into RAF Brize Norton to vandalise a number of RAF planes, especially because they think they'll be helping the Israelis defend themselves against the Iranians. We're also speaking about Israel and the furious Brits stuck in Israel, slamming the Foreign Office for failing to evacuate. It's really interesting, actually. The Foreign Office are now saying they're sending a plane, but that won't happen until Israeli airspace is opened again. Where on earth, why on earth, when will that happen? We know we want it to happen soon. We want there to be peace in the Middle East, and we want Israeli citizens and everyone else who lives in the Middle East to have a peaceful life. But given everything that is happening, why can't the Brits just be evacuated in the same way as so many other nations, including Germany, have been? We'll talk about assisted dying as well. Just a very, very slim majority for that. 23 votes in Parliament, down from 55 in November. We'll talk to you a number of people, a number of MPs who voted for that. We'll speak in a second to Mark Francois. He is the MP who voted against it, like many others. We'll speak to the Brits stranded in Israel as well, and others too. Matt Vickers will join us later on, the shadow crime policing, fire and immigration minister, and all sorts of stories, including the fact that the Tories want to crack down on tool theft. That affects so many people who are the backbone of our economy, the white van men and white van women who go around the country and fixing things up, and of course so many of them have their tools stolen. It is not a good thing at all. It's very hot as well. I don't know if you've noticed that, but the yellow storm warning has been issued as the UK heat wave intensifies. About 32 degrees at Heathrow today, which I think was the highest recorded. We'll hear all the facts from Joe Wheeler a little bit later on, one of the two weather forecasters I will ever have on my programme. Philip Ingram and Lee Scott will join us later on, talking about in the Middle East. Also, what on earth is going on at the BBC, at BBC Breakfast? The presenter there, one of them anyway, Naga Munchetti, hauled in by BBC bosses over allegations she bullied a junior staffer and made an off-air sex jibe. Goodness me. Also, the boss of BBC Breakfast, Richard Frediani, taking an extended period of leave. He has been found, and a complaint has been upheld against him for shaking a woman. I mean, look, newsrooms are often places, I worked in many of them, where tensions run high, where there are people who have, you know, a lot to say, a lot of creative energy and so on. But shaking someone and making those sort of disgusting remarks, not good if it indeed happened. Lots to discuss today. I want to make sure you get your views on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. And remember, the main number does three things. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note, you can send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss here on Talk between now and 7. Stay with us. Well, Parliament has been busy today. It has some sittings on a Friday, but rarely that dramatic. Usually they deal with legislation that's not that controversial on a Friday. Today it certainly has been. Assisted dying. We'll speak to Mark Francois in just a second. He is against it. Also, the pro-Palestinian activists breaking into RAF Brize Norton. Starmer calls it disgraceful, an act of vandalism. One of them rode up on a scooter up to an Airbus Voyager, spray painted its jet engine. How on earth was that allowed to happen? How did they get in? Why were they not stopped? Let's speak to the Shadow Defence Minister. And I apparently, Mark, apologies, I pronounced your constituency wrongly yesterday. It's Rayleigh and Wickford, is that correct?
Technically, yes, it is. It is Rayleigh and Wickford, thank you.
Rayleigh and Wickford, I call it Raleigh. Apologies, I'll try to get that right. From now and in the future. Mark, just let's talk about the pro-Palestinian activists getting into RAF Brize Norton. I mean, completely disgraceful behaviour and very dangerous as well.
Yes, I mean, Peter, look, we've just had an absolute tragedy with that Air India 787 crashing. So the idea that anyone would break into, particularly an RAF airbase, and interfere, you know, in any way with the engines of a large aircraft, which could be used to carry troops, sometimes are used to carry their families, or can be used for air-to-air refueling, full of jet fuel, is totally reprehensible. But then you have to ask, how on earth was that allowed to happen? How did they get in to a strategic airbase? And in fact, the Strategic Defence Review points out how very important RAF Brize Norton actually is. So, specifically highlighted in the white paper. So what should have happened today, we've had a very important debate, but what should have happened was at the end of that, the Defence Secretary, John Healey, should have come to Parliament and made a statement to MPs about what happened. Now, sometimes in these instances, you don't have all the facts immediately.
But he could tell us something. He could give some sort of reaction.
And the Defence Secretary has rightly announced earlier today, in reaction to this incident, there's going to be an immediate review of security at all military installations across the country, and presumably abroad as well. Absolutely welcome that.
Go ahead.
He should have come to Parliament so MPs could have asked him about that review. The government can make a statement at any time, so they could have delayed the adjournment debate at the end of the day. And by the way, I had the adjournment debate. I would have gladly waited in order to tell MPs what we do know, and crucially to allow MPs to ask questions. James Cartledge, my boss, the Shadow Defence Secretary, called for a statement earlier today. I'm repeating that now, even though the House has risen. So if we can't have one today, because the House is now up, we absolutely must have a statement from the Defence Secretary in Parliament on Monday. It'd be unforgivable.
If John Healey doesn't give a statement to Parliament on Monday, will you, as the Conservatives, be asking an urgent question about this?
Well, I think you can take it as read that we are very keen that it is raised in Parliament either one way or another.
Yes.
By the way, and I still think they should have said something today, but the weekend will give them more time. So that there would be absolutely no excuse not to come to Parliament on Monday and tell us what the government do know. I mean, MPs have a right to know. A number of us have military facilities in our constituencies. There are families there who will be worried. This should never have happened, and we need to be assured it's not going to happen again. So there must be a statement in the Commons on Monday.
And tell me, the impunity that this happened with, a lot of these activists, of course, film themselves doing these things. We know because the reason we know so much about it, in fact, we've been showing it on the screen for people who are watching, that these activists filmed it, put it online, because they know it's unlikely there'll be any severe consequences for doing so.
Well, yes. By the way, I've just found that reference in the white paper, Peter. Sorry. So this is the Strategic Defence Review.
Yeah.
And page 114, I like to quote from documents. It says here, particular attention should be given to contingency planning for RAF Brize Norton, the main hub in the UK for much of what the RAF delivers globally. That's right. And our transport aircraft, our refuelling aircraft are based there. And
it's also where the Prime Minister comes in and out, and members of the royal family when they're coming in and out of the country at Brize Norton. And Keir Starmer came back from Canada on Wednesday morning, and had this been 48 hours previously or 36 hours previously, he could have been there at the time.
Well, there seems to be some confusion about whether one of the aircraft that they got near was the one that is used as the Prime Minister's aircraft. Now, I don't know whether they did or not. That's not apparent from the video footage, but that would be exactly the kind of question that MPs would ask the Defence Secretary in the House of Commons. We are paid to ask questions. But look, these people did this as a propaganda stunt. That's obvious. That's why they filmed it. What if they'd had more malign intent? What if that camera had been a bomb?
Yeah.
Imagine that the danger and the potential loss of life that could have resulted in that breach in security.
No, it's really worrying, and it's something that the government has to deal with.
Yeah, it's in no way to excuse what they did. They were completely wrong, particularly after Air India.
Yeah.
But you do have to ask how they were able to get into that airbase in the first place. People have got questions to
Absolutely. Mark, I just want to ask you about the assisted dying vote. Just before we do, let's see the moment of what happened in Parliament a little bit earlier on this afternoon when it passed by a very slim majority.
Ayes to the right, 314. The noes to the left, 291. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. And look! That completes third reading. If people who wish to leave now, please do so.
That was the Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle there. Mark, you voted against this. Tell us why.
I've been against it from the start. I've long had concerns about the so-called safeguards, particularly around what's been called the issue of coercion. The idea that someone who's elderly and potentially vulnerable could, in certain circumstances, be lent on by relatives to end their life early. And that is not a thing that would happen very often, but it is possible that would happen. And I mean, but Parliament has spent months debating this, months, and it will now go to the House of Lords, where they will now go through the bill in very great detail, and it is likely that there will be, further amendments in the House of Lords. So the bill has passed in principle in the Commons, but we'll have to see what happens when it gets to the House of Lords.
What do you think will happen?
Well, I think the Lords will have more time. They are a revising chamber, remember, Peter. Mm-hmm. So their job is to make a better job, if you like, in pub English, of legislation that's been through the House of Commons. And so, they will have the time in order to scrutinise this bill in even more detail. And, I mean, I don't know what changes the Lords will recommend, but I suspect there will be a number. And then, we may, if the Commons and the Lords can't agree, we'll get into what's known colloquially as ping pong, where amendments go backwards and forwards between the two houses. So, I'm sure there will be further changes in the House of Lords, but sitting here now, I can't tell you what they're going to be.
I wonder. Just
I say again, at the risk of hammering the nail, even despite debating that very, very important bill, at the end of that, when it was all done, the government still had an opportunity to come and make a statement, which they didn't take, and which they should have done. And there must be a statement on them.
Well, let's see if they make one. In terms of, you've criticised the Defence Secretary, presumably you agree with me that the Foreign Office and the Foreign Secretary and Celebrity Mastermind contestant David Lammy should have done much more in regard to Israel, specifically getting British nationals out. They've now said they're going to send a plane at long last. This has taken a number of days, and the fact that still they're saying they'll fly people out when Israeli airspace opens, well, we just have no idea when that could be. There are a lot of people stranded there. We're going to talk to a few of them later on in the programme, but surely the government should have acted far sooner and emulated what other governments, like Germany, for example, have done and got people out.
Well, Peter, I hope you won't think I'm guilty of, hammering the nail to split the plank of wood. But if it's a military transport aircraft, that would go from Brize Norton ordinarily. So, all the more reason to make sure that base is secure. Yeah. So could the government have acted quicker? Yes, perhaps. But we'll have to see how things evolve over the weekend.
Sure.
But definitely, the government are going to have questions to answer in the House Commons on Monday.
Thank you, Mark. That is Mark Francois there. He's a Shadow Defence Minister. He's also the Conservative MP for Raleigh and Wickford. And thanks to the person who told me about the pronunciation of Raleigh. Happy to be corrected with that. Accuracy is so important. And just on accuracy, someone who knows about these things, who's listening to the programme right now, has messaged me to say the Prime Minister actually flies out of Stansted rather than Brize Norton. I know that the Royal flight has flown out of Brize Norton previously. In fact, I've been on the Royal flight and flown out of Brize Norton, but clearly Stansted is there. It used to be Brize Norton, but now it is Stansted. Apparently under David Cameron it was Brize Norton, and later it has been Stansted. So there we are. Lots of reaction. Cliff in Berkshire says, afternoon Peter, were the sabotage planes those that could have been used to evacuate those British citizens stuck in Israel? It's a really good question to which I do not know the answer. Jason in Bristol says, I'll tell you what will be interesting is when they do the rest of these protests are broken into Brize Norton, how quickly they get taken to court. If it's anything like Southport riots. They were in court and then in prison within 2 weeks. Barry says, afternoon, Peter, those people who got into Brize Norton because of complacent, lax peacetime security. That's Barry, who is an RAF veteran. And Tony says, it's not vandalism, Peter, it's an act of terrorism, says Tony. I don't think it is an act of terrorism per se, although maybe it could be construed as that. It'll be very interesting to see if charges are brought, what those charges are, and whether those people are brought to book. Margaret and Lisa in Birmingham say, I think Talk deserve a pat on the back. The Foreign Office was silent till it was highlighted by Talk in regard to these Israeli people in Israel. I hope the people in Israel are home soon, says Margaret and Lisa in Birmingham, who say Larry is the star of Number 10. You're absolutely right, Margaret and Lisa. Thank you for that. Shelley says, I'm a 66-year-old British woman, solo traveller, presently in Israel, trying to get home the safest way possible. I've had no constructive instruction from the British Foreign Office. Expect to go by bus or land through Jordan or Egypt, where both have risks. As a lone traveller, I'm nervous about crossing these borders. We'll await further instruction, but each day is creating a lot of anxiety. That's Shelley there. Shelley, I'm so sorry to hear that that has been happening to you. We'll be talking to a couple of other people in your position as well, who are British people in Israel. Hopefully the Foreign Office now has its act together. They have emailed various people, and they have said, Israeli airspace currently remains closed. We are working with Israeli authorities to provide charter flights from Tel Aviv airport when airspace reopens based on the levels of demand from British nationals. That is the response from the Foreign Office. So perhaps things could be moving. They clearly haven't got in touch with Shelley. I wonder if they've got in touch with the other people we'll be speaking to a little bit later on. We will speak to Zach and Lee, who are both in Israel. We spoke to them yesterday as well. In fact, Zach is next on the programme, so we'll find out exactly what he has been told. Stay with us here on Talk.
There's a bill going through Parliament which will give counter-terrorism powers to our law enforcement, the ability to get in much earlier. I know we've got to do more. That's why I'm working with our partners to do that, particularly in relation to law enforcement in the north of France. And then importantly, where people do come to the country who aren't entitled to be here, processing their claims and then returning them to where they came from. And since we've been in power, 30,000 people who've no right to be in the United Kingdom have now been removed from the United Kingdom.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much for all the messages that are coming in. I've just been having a look at my phone. I'll read out some of those tweets in a minute. Dave says Brize Norton is also for the arrivals and departures main hub for the Falkland Islands. And Terry in Slough says, hi Peter, what on earth is this country coming to? We've got a navy that can't stop inflatable boats from invading this country, morons vandalising planes and a supposedly secure RAF base. Excuse the sarcasm, but what next? Someone nicking a tank from an army base? This country is a complete joke, says Terry in Slough. Terry, it is, and sarcasm, I think, is a good response to it. Incredulity is fine, although you know the difference between someone who makes a sarcastic remark and the person who doesn't get it. That is called a sarcasm. Right then, on a much more serious issue, let's go to Israel, because furious British people are stuck in Israel, slamming the Foreign Office for failing to evacuate them. Well, they've now been told that whilst Israel airspace currently remains closed, the Foreign Office says it's working with Israeli authorities to provide charter flights from Tel Aviv airport when airspace reopens based on the levels of demand from British nationals. Let's check in with Zach Wagman. We spoke to him yesterday, and he's stranded in Israel. He's also a Conservative councillor for Stanmore. Zach, have things got better, or are they changing?
Hi, Peter. It's good to see you, although I suppose I wish I wasn't having to see you again this time today. Look, the good news I'll start with is that where we are, we had an unbroken night of sleep for the first time in a week. There were no sirens here, though we had one this afternoon. The good news, as well, as you mentioned, is that the government has said that they will deliver chartered flights back home once airspace opened, which I suppose is a step in the right direction, but I think all told it's extremely disappointing. Not only are we waiting potentially weeks for airspace to open when other countries have evacuated their foreign nationals from neighbouring countries or via ship to Cyprus, but by the time they can take us home, we'd be able to fly home on a commercial flight anyway. So really what they're doing is too little, too late, and it's not of any help to the people we discussed yesterday, the vulnerable people, the elderly people, people that need medication, people whose children are at home, the people that need to get home now.
Yes, I mean, it's very, very interesting that they're essentially saying when airspace opens. But as you say, well, you're presumably getting on a flight as soon as you can. You need to get home, you need to get back to work, back to your life in the UK. I know you went out there for a wedding, but it was meant to be a shorter break than it is. But given the instability of what's going on at the moment, that's not going to do you much good, is it?
It does absolutely no good to just tell us, well, at some point in the future, when you'd be able to jump on a regular flight home, we'll bring you home on a special flight that we hope to be able to do. The only other nugget of information or advice in there was that if you choose to make your way to the Egyptian or the Jordanian border, which of course the Israeli government recommends not travelling far away from a shelter, so travelling across the country is well out of what's advised, but the UK government says if you want to go there, subject to demand, we might be able to give you on-bound travel as long as you've booked your flight or booked your hotel at the other end. So they might save us a bit of time or money on a taxi once you get to the dangerous border crossing in Jordan or Egypt, and I hear they're giving out biscuits there, but that's subject to demand anyway, so you might get there, and I saw you showed some images from some of the borders just before, and it's a long queue, so there's a good chance they won't even have that transport available. So quite frankly, it's too little too late, and this government, the UK government, has been waiting a week to give us nothing. There is a minister, Hamish Faulkner, he's the Minister for the Middle East and the Minister responsible for consular and crisis, and he worked in the Foreign Office for 10 years before becoming a minister, before becoming a member of Parliament, and it's really hard to see what him and his team have been doing for the last week, quite frankly.
Yes, certainly. I mean, the level of communication with you, as you were saying yesterday, just hasn't been good. And then what you're being told now, they say the safety of British nationals remains our top priority. Do you believe them?
Of course I don't believe them. How could I? We've heard hardly anything from them. The Americans, we know, are chartering cruise ships to take their citizens from the ports in northern Israel over to Cyprus. The Germans have escorted their citizens, over the border to Jordan and flown them home. The Bulgarians, the Slovakians, the Czechs, they've done the same. If David Lammy and his team really cared about me and my family here, if it was genuinely their utmost priority, they would get us out, or they'd at least tell us how they're planning on getting us out. It's a choice at this point. They can phone up their colleagues in Germany, in Bulgaria, in Slovakia and say, we don't know how to do this. Can you help us?
Yeah, you've done it. You've done it, Germany, Bulgaria. Can you tell us how it's done, or can you even, they could even charter a military aircraft from one of those countries and say, look, we can't do it at the moment. We've got a problem, or there's some issue, or whatever the problem is. Can you do it for us and we'll give you the money for it?
That would be the simplest solution. These countries have a playbook that they'd be able to just run again to bring us home. So, quite frankly, they can take us to Bulgaria and Germany, and we can make our way home from there on a connecting flight to somewhere in the UK. That's the least of my worries right now. It's about getting out of here first. And the UK government can do this, but it's a choice. But as you mentioned on the show before, they make many choices every day, and protecting the RAF planes seems to not be one of their choices that they want to do. So yeah, it's symptomatic of this government that seems to pick and choose its priorities when it suits them.
Okay, Zach, thank you for your thoughts there. That's Zach Wagman. I hope you get home soon. Let's stay in touch. Zach is a Brit stranded in Israel. He's also a Conservative councillor for Stanmore in London. We'll be talking to my friend Lee Scott a little bit later on as well. Lee is there with his family. He broke his arm, or didn't break his arm, but his arm was injured yesterday. He was caught up in one of those attacks. What do you make of all this? I mean, it's so straightforward. Why can't they just get these people out? That's what the British Foreign Service, the Foreign Office, is meant to do. 0344 499 1000. What do you make of all of this? I mean, it's interesting. Zach has been there now for, I think, 9 days. He was due to return on Monday past. He was in Israel for a family wedding. A lot of his family still there, waiting for the UK government to facilitate and support his return home. He's just up the coast from Tel Aviv there as well. Thank you to Debbie, who says, did those protesters at RAF Brize Norton not realise that it was catastrophic damage they could have caused if there was an international crisis? Those planes attempted to take off. It's an act of terrorism against Britain. And Debbie says it shows the damage this government has done to British people by constantly slating Israel. Why would their authorities want to work with Britain? Well done, Keir Starmer. Well done, says Debbie. I totally see where you're coming from on that one as well, Debbie, and thank you for it. Lots to discuss in all of this. We'll be talking about assisted dying in a second. Daniel Francis MP, who's the Labour MP for Bexley Heath and Crayford, he is going to put one of the amendments forward aimed at improving protection for people with diminished mental health capacity, but it was voted down by MPs. We'll talk to him about that and about his views on all of this. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
So a long-time listener and viewer of this programme who doesn't want to give his name about what he's going to say, which I totally understand. He worked as a cabin supervisor for the RAF, and worked on the VIP aircrafts. And he has just told me that pick up or drop off at secure airports, it happens close to the current Prime Minister's home. So it could be Brize Norton, as it was with David Cameron. It could be Stansted, as it is now, for example. It was Brize Norton under David Cameron. Stansted was John Major, for example. Blair was Heathrow. So there you go. I'm learning an awful lot about that. So thank you to that person whose name I will protect, but I've absolutely no doubt, because I know him, that is absolutely true, and he worked in that area. Very, very interesting. Maybe he will tell his story one day, you never know. We're going to talk about the assisted dying debate now. Before the vote, there were statements across the House on assisted dying. Kim Ledbetter was the Labour MP who brought the bill to Parliament. This is what she had to say today.
We are voting on an issue that matters deeply to our constituents. Yeah. Indeed, the issue before us today is very personal for many people, so many of our constituents, but many of us as well. It is an issue which transcends party politics, and I want to thank colleagues from across the House who have shared their very personal stories with me. And I'm grateful to all colleagues who have studied the detail of the bill. It is, of course, essential that we come to a decision based on the content of what it actually says. And I've been pleased to work with members on all sides of the debate to ensure that this legislation is something that Parliament can be proud of. A cogent, workable bill that has one simple thread running through it: the need to correct the profound injustices of the status quo and to offer a compassionate and safe choice to terminally ill people.
Well, Sir James Cleverly is the former Conservative Foreign Secretary, former Conservative Home Secretary as well. He voted against it. This is what he said.
This is an important moment, and whilst I respect the Honourable Lady, I disagree with her assessment that it is now or never, and it is this bill or no bill. Yeah. And that a vote against this at third reading is a vote to maintain the status quo. None of those things are true. Because this is such a fundamental change, we do need to make sure that we have that enhanced level of scrutiny about the detail of this bill. And I do not believe that, even though, like all of us, we want to avoid suffering and alleviate suffering wherever possible, I do not believe we've had the opportunity to get this bill into a right shape, which is why I will be opposing this third reading, and I encourage others to do likewise. Yeah.
Sir James Cleverly there. This is the moment the vote passed.
Ayes to the right 314. The noes to the left 291. The ayes have it, the ayes have it. Oh, look!
That was Sir Lindsay Hoyle there, the Speaker of the House of Commons, talking about that. Well, one person who did oppose assisted dying and actually put an amendment forward. There are many, many amendments put forward. This one was defeated. Daniel Francis, who's the Labour MP for Bexleyheath and Crayford. Daniel, thanks for joining us today on the programme. First of all, can you tell us, in general, we'll get to your amendment and the specifics of that in a second, I promise I'll ask you about that, but I just wonder, in general, overall, why you feel the way you do about assisted dying?
I support the principle of assisted dying, and I have throughout, but the bill as it stands, which will now be sent to the House of Lords, has flaws in it, in my opinion, and in the opinion of a substantial number of colleagues, relating to how it interacts with coercion, my particular concern about learning disability, and also about access to palliative care going forward. So I do still fundamentally believe that the bill as it stands does have those safeguarding concerns which haven't been addressed through the process.
Tell me about a coercive aspect of this. I mean, are you genuinely worried that people could be coerced into saying they want to die?
Well, I sat on the bill committee, so for 29 sessions I was a member of the bill committee. Ultimately, the reasons you can give to seek an assisted death under this process can be, I don't want my loved one to have to care for me anymore. They can be, I want to have a larger inheritance left to my family. They can be that you might not be in suffering or pain, but you know that they are legitimate reasons why you can decide, once you have the 6-month prognosis, to go through the process. And the doctor and the panel cannot refuse your application if you say either I feel I'll be a burden on my family, or the inheritance I leave them will be less as a result of taking this process.
Tell us about the amendment specifically you put forward. It was aiming to improve protection for people with diminished mental capacity. Tell us your thoughts about that and why you brought that forward.
Throughout the bill committee process, and again through report stage over the last few weeks, I've pressed very heavily my concerns about the impact on people with learning disabilities. I believe that the Mental Capacity Act 2005 wasn't written for this process, and that the assessments that would be undertaken, that there is risk there. There's particularly risk that family members for somebody with a learning disability have no right to be involved in the process, and if they did have concerns, that the first time they may know that their loved one has been through the process is after they have died. The Spanish system, for instance, there is a right for family members in that instance to make the panel aware of their concerns and to appeal the decision. But that right was not there today. And my mental capacity concern was that there is a presumption that everybody in this country has mental capacity under the Mental Capacity Act, and that there needs to be stronger safeguarding to assess that mental capacity.
We saw a serious drop in the number of people voting for this. It is what's called a free vote. Of course, you can vote how you want, how your conscience says that you should vote. And what happened in November was that 55 people voted for the bill as it was then. 55 majority was what happened in November. Today, 23, so that's down, of course, 32. This will go to the House of Lords. It'll come back again. Parliament will vote it, the Commons will vote it on it again before it becomes law. I mean, what do you think is going to happen in the Lords and with the rest of this process?
Well, ultimately, I think Parliament has had it, or the House of Commons rather has had it say today. But I just, I hope the Lords do give some great scrutiny to some of those issues that we've been raising through the process. As I say, in principle, I support the right for assisted death, but there remain those concerns. As you've said, the majority has been more than halved in the Commons today, from 55 down to 23. That shows that the more scrutiny there is of this bill, my colleagues in the Commons have more and more doubts about it, and I hope the Lords look at those and ask us to make those extra safeguarding amendments that I and others have been pressing for.
Daniel, just on your point about palliative care there, Tim in Southampton has been in touch. He's texted the programme 87222 with the word talk in his text. Peter, the unexpected consequence of the assisted dying bill will be the defunding of palliative care. What is your perspective on that, Daniel?
Well, my concern is that this government has inherited an NHS that's broken. We need to get that fixed. We're starting that process, but ultimately, there is a postcode lottery currently in palliative care, and we have not fixed that. And we do now risk a situation where it will be easier for somebody with a terminal prognosis to seek a death than to get access to palliative care.
OK, Daniel, thank you very much. That's Daniel Francis there. He is the Labour MP for Bexley Heath and Crayford, the neighbouring constituency, of course, to Old Bexley and Sidcup, which one of my great friends, James Brokenshire, used to be the MP for. What is your view on all of this? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. In regard to what's happened with RAF Brize Norton, Jeremy's been in touch on WhatsApp and says Lammy's attitude will be it's your own damn fault for going to Israel. He doesn't give a stuff. Talking there about the Foreign Secretary and Celebrity Mastermind contestant David Lammy. Phil in Great Yarmouth says, good afternoon, Peter. The attack on the RAF planes, it was an aerosol this time. Next time it could be a petrol bomb. These people are a great threat to national security, says Phil. Also, lots of people getting in touch about Israel, about getting people out there. Scott's in Doncaster. Scott, I understand you were in the Navy yourself. What do you make of this situation? It doesn't seem to be, I mean, look, there's a lot of danger, clearly. It seems to have died down slightly. Israelis not in shelters last night, but nonetheless, many other nations have managed to get their people out of Israel.
Hi, Peter. It's no, I was in the army.
You're in the army, okay.
Yeah. But what I can't get my head around is why we're not sending the Navy to pick them up and then take them to Cyprus, to Akatoy, when most of the Navy's in the Mediterranean as it is. And
it would be pretty straight. You would imagine, I don't know, but I would imagine that would be logistically a fairly straightforward thing to do.
Yeah, we did it when it was to Libya. Mm-hmm. We did it very quickly.
What's going on here, Scott, do you think? I mean, the government is saying we'll working with Israeli authorities to charter flights when airspace reopens, but people will be able to get on commercial flights anyway at that stage.
I think it's a big show of our discrepancies in the military and how much it's been defunded, and the fact that Labour doesn't like Israel and literally just don't want nothing to do with it.
I mean, it's an interesting perspective. What do you think should happen, like, right now? You think the Foreign Secretary or the Defence Secretary should just say, like, just get this sorted today, get those people out?
Yeah, 100%. Like I say, get one of the auxiliary ships in the Navy, because most of it's in the Middle East and the Red Sea. Go to Tel Aviv, pick them up and take them to British air bases in Cyprus and fly them back, which also is going to be a challenge now with buoyancy being damaged by them, shall we say, less than clever people.
Yeah. Scott, where did you serve when you were in the army?
Afghanistan.
Good man. Okay, well, thank you for serving our country. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate your call as well, Scott, in Doncaster there. Lots to discuss with all of this. 0344 499 1000. And we'll talk about assisted dying. We'll talk about the Israel situation and getting our British compatriots out. We'll also talk about the pro-Palestinian protesters damaging, vandalising RAF planes at Brize Norton, and something the Conservatives want to do here in the UK, which is protect people from tool theft. Lots of people I know who are watching and listening to this programme are maybe working today. They're people who have tools. They're people who those are really, really important. They can't do the job without them, and they often get stolen. What are the police actually doing about it? Some people might think it's not the most important thing in the world. Actually, it is. If you turn up for a job and you realise, hold on a second, my van was broken into last night, that is a really, really serious thing that means big financial consequences for people. We'll talk to Matt Vickers in a second. He is the Shadow Crime Policing and Fire and Illegal Immigration Minister. He's a Conservative MP. Lots to discuss with him. If you've got any questions for him, anything you want me to ask him, text it through 87222 with the word talk in your text, or better still, give me a ring 0344 499 1000.
The support from the British government, got nothing. I've registered on everything I'm meant to. I haven't had anything at all. No guidance. All right, the only guidance we have been given is obviously to make our way to the Jordan or Egyptian border. I'm a 16-year-old woman here on my own. How am I going to do that? I've got an 8-month pregnant daughter, young children. She's not going to get me there. I just feel that we are about the only country in the world that's government have just left us here in what's known as the war zone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's talk now to Matt Vickers. He is the Shadow Crime Policing, Fire and Illegal Immigration Minister. He's got a campaign on tool theft going on. This is, of course, very important to a lot of our viewers and listeners who use tools in their jobs. Maybe they're using them right now as they listen to this station or are watching it, maybe. Matt, before we have a chat with you, let's have a look at your campaign on tool theft. He is the Conservative MP for Stockton West, as well as a Shadow Home Office Minister, and joins me now. Matt, this can be a really, really big issue, can't it? And of course there are, as you say, those car boot sales, those places where people don't look too closely at the origin of these tools, where they're being sold often at knockdown rates, but of course full 100% profit for the people who've nicked them.
It's a huge problem. And actually, when you think about our tradesmen across the country, these people who create the economic growth, they add value to our economy.
Backbone of our economy, Matt. Absolute backbone of our economy. We would get up early in the morning, go out to work, fix the things we need fixed, build the homes we need. You know, they're renovating. I was chatting to a couple across the way from me, renovating a flat near me the other day. They need their tools.
They build the world around us. Everything we're sat in is built by these tradesmen who do everything, and they are the backbone of the economy. But actually, when you see this crime going on, it's guys getting up early on the morning to go to work. They come down, the van's been done over, the doors have been ripped off, the windows been smashed. There's a cost in terms of what's happened to the van. There's the cost of losing the tools. But then they've also got the fact they can't go to work that day. Someone's took the day off work to get some work done, can't get it done. There's a huge cost to these people who just get put out of business by it. Some of this kit's really expensive. So basically that's what it's all about. It's about making that noise. Then go down to the car boot sale on Sunday and see Joe Bloggs selling it in broad daylight in front of their eyes with no action taken by local authorities and police. It's just not acceptable. How are these people meant to operate in that trade? We need those people in that business. So we brought forward measures this week. We had the crime policing bill through. We brought forward an amendment that had 3 parts. One was about making sure that when someone's fined for this, it included not only the cost of the tools, but the cost of the damage that was done nicking them, and the cost of the work that was lost. Because these are families, often one-man bands. You know, if he can't go to work that day, he can't feed his family that week. Like it's real consequences for small business people. On top of that, we said the sentences should be tougher. It shouldn't just be about, oh, you stole tools. It should be about you stole tools that stop someone going to work and stop the economy operating. And then on top of that, we need councils to have a plan. Councils and police officers have to look at what they're doing in their patch to stop these things being sold day in, day out. It's off the charts.
Do you think they'll listen to you? Will the government listen? It said, I spoke to Keir Starmer yesterday in an interview with him. He said the police are going to get more money. We know in the spending review, although the overall budget of the Home Office has been reduced in the spending review. Do you think they're going to prioritise this?
Well, I think so. We brought forward amendments yesterday. They could have voted on it, and their Labour MPs got the chance to vote to toughen up these sentences, to make councils take action, and they walked through a lobby and actively voted against it. It's madness. And when it comes down to police numbers and police figures, in last year we had record numbers of police on the streets. We've now seen Labour's jobs tax, this national insurance increase, they're taxing the police off our streets. £230 million of additional tax being paid by our police forces. That is madness. The police minister in there will not commit to the fact that numbers will stay the same or improve during the Parliament. They know the numbers are going to fall.
Well, if you're a tradesman or work with builders or work with tools in any way, let me know your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000. Have you had them stolen? What's happened? Have you ever had the police done the right thing? Have they got them back to you? Leslie's been in touch, says your van's not even safe in a Sainsbury's car park. I parked my van in Sainsbury's car park to do a job, only could come back to find a hole drilled in the sliding door. Goodness me. Matt, let's talk about assisted dying as well now, because I know you're in Parliament today. You'd usually be in your constituency at this time on a Friday, usually I would imagine, but in Stockton West. But of course there's been this big vote today. How did you vote and why?
So I voted against. As an MP, you get to hear all sorts of harrowing stories. You hear from people who've lost family members and friends in the toughest and most awful of circumstances. And then you also hear about, well, you hear from disabled people and disability rights groups who are campaigning because they think this is the start of a slippery slope. They want to see safeguards in place that mean this thing can't be extended, that people who make such a decision could not be coerced, that they don't feel pressured, that they're capable of making that decision. You know, there was 300 amendments put forward to put more safeguards into this to protect people who have special educational needs, people with mental health issues. They were all rejected. So it's not about whether nobody in that place wants to see anybody live a painful, well, go through a painful, prolonged, terrible death. And we know how awful some of these situations are. But at the same time, we need to make sure that the only people do it are the people who are able to make the decision, because they have the capability to do it, that they aren't coerced, that they aren't under pressure, they don't feel awful about, you know, the family members who can't access that stuff because the palliative care system's broken, because the care system's broken, actually. They know that their inheritance is being eaten away for their children, so they make decisions that they might not otherwise make. Horrendous, difficult decision to make. And you saw today the utter silence in the chamber just before that decision was made and just before those votes were read out, and immediately after that people were sombered by this. It was a very difficult call to make, with really awful consequences.
And quite a number of people making their decision or changing their mind, down from a 55 majority in Parliament to a 23 majority today. What happens now, Matt?
It goes forwards to the House of Lords. We'll see what's done there to toughen it up or to scrutinise it. Because actually this bill doesn't feel, because it's quite a fundamental change in the relationship between the state and between individuals. It's a really big deal. It needs all the scrutiny it can get. It feels like it's been rushed. You know, it doesn't feel like all of these valid questions, very valid questions about the protections that are in place. I mean, one of the amendments was about whether there should be in any way a financial incentive on doctors who deliver this. You know, should it be in their place to advise people, to suggest it? And then there was things about, could it be impromptu raised with, you know, you go to your doctor, he tells you that something's wrong with you, and then he mentions, by the way, you might think about.
Yeah.
There's a debate about whether that's right, whether that's wrong. Those things need to be discussed.
What do you think on that particular point?
I think it's a really rough thing. I don't think it should be raised impromptu. I know people who go, I mean, people will have very different views out there, but I go to the doctor, and if the doctor tells me that I need to think about this, then I assume he's the guy who knows best.
Well, you generally think about it, and you generally think, well, they're a trained medical professional. They must know what they're up to, or at least they have more knowledge than you or I do. Therefore, you know, you don't sort of look into, oh, is this the right medicine or not? Well, some people do, of course, but I generally don't. I generally do what the doc tells me to do. But if that person in a position of authority says, well, you might want to think about assisted dying, well, that's something you are going to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, I think definitely. And I think, you know, if there was a foolproof way to do this, if there was a way that would ensure that nobody was disabled, could find themselves in a difficult situation, there was safeguards in there to protect people with mental health conditions. Before this bill came, it talked about the ultimate safeguard was this High Court judge who was going to, you know,
I mean, Kim Ledbetter said over and over and over and over again, she said, oh, the High Court judge, it's going to be the scrutiny is going to be the best in the world, and this is going to be the safest and toughest system and legislation. And then, of course, the High Court judge bit changed, and the High Court judges said, hold on a second, we've loads to do already. We don't want to be adjudicating on this. And also, it's not really up to us, it's up to medical professionals. But then that disappeared, and for me, that was the moment where I sort of thought, hold on a second, maybe this would work. That's the moment for me where I thought, right, you know, Dragon's Den style, I'm out. And of course, all of that had huge consequences for I would imagine how a lot of people would have thought about this, both in Parliament and in the country as well, Matt.
I think that's exactly what's happened. I think that what happened to the numbers today in the chamber was people who saw this package that came forwards at the beginning with this safeguard of having the High Court judge, then seen all these other debates around what it means for special education. I mean, there was measures in there about protecting people so that people with anorexia couldn't end up falling within the sort of definition and scope of this. That protection wasn't put in place. There's a load of debate around this, 300 different amendments, and those questions don't feel like they've been answered or even discussed properly. It's a sombre day.
Yeah, Graham has been in touch from Bushy, and he says the assisted dying bill should have been killed off ages ago, as we and the MPs were lied to with the safeguards when it was initially proposed, says Graham. We'll continue talking about that throughout the programme, and if you have a thought on it, 0344 499 1000. Matt, while I have you, I just want to talk to you about the protesters attacked outside the Iranian embassy, 6 of them arrested there. What do you make of that?
Well, scary, isn't it? We've got these embassies. We need to make sure that we can continue to keep the people who are, regardless of who it is and what it is. There needs to be a standard of safety for people in terms of an embassy, the people who live here and are protected by such status. But yeah, we've got to get to the detail of it and learn a little bit more about who they are, what's going on and what went.
And the pro-Palestinian protesters vandalising RAF planes at Brize Norton. This is a big safety breach, isn't it? As well as the fact that they've damaged those planes, they've vandalised them, and they'll be presumably on the ground for a while they are fixed. And actually, when we're dealing with so many threats and the fact that the Middle East is in a really, really tense state at the moment, including the fact that so many British people can't actually get home yet. There's a lot to think about here, isn't there?
Do you know what? It's not protest, it's criminal damage. It's absolutely appalling that people would... This kit is there. These people who work on these bases are there to keep this country safe. It's
Correct.
not a protest to get in their way, to create damage to that kit. Is absolutely unacceptable. They should have the toughest of tough sentences imposed on them. And we need to have a real look at these protest groups and whether we should even allow them to continue in such a place. You know, should we be banning groups that are out there doing damage?
They've tried that, though, with a number of groups. They've tried to prescribe them in some ways. They've tried as well. I mean, even Just Stop Oil said that it was disbanding. But, of course, they just pop up and, you know, the same people pop up in different guises as well, don't they, Matt? And they say they're protesting. But as you say, this is criminal damage. And they filmed themselves doing this. And I wonder, I mean, back to what we're talking about tool theft and so on, there's so little consequence for so many illegal actions these days. There's so many people who think that they can just break the law and get away with it and film it and show off about it.
I mean, it's beyond criminal damage even, isn't it? They're damaging our national interests. They're damaging our national security, actually. This infrastructure and this equipment that's there. These people operate on this base to keep this country safe. And anyone who gets in the way with that should be given the full force of the law and more, actually.
Matt, thank you very much indeed for joining me today. That is Matt Vickers. He is the MP for Stockton West for the Conservatives. He's also a shadow crime policing, fire and illegal immigration minister. What do you think of what he said there? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can get your voice on the air. There's lots to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Kevin O'Sullivan will be in this chair between 7 and 9, and then What Just Happened will be on between 9 and 10. One story I am fairly sure that he will be talking about is one that has just emerged. This is Meghan Markle releasing a rosé wine enthused with joy and whimsy. Yeah, she has relaunched her as ever merchandise empire. I'm not sure how a wine can be enthused with joy and whimsy. I'm not sure that sentence actually makes grammatical sense, that something is enthused with joy and whimsy. She's just a plank, really, isn't she? Honestly, she's just someone who she's not connected to the reality. We're going to talk to Colonel Richard Kemp in a minute. He's a former British Army commander. He's been in Israel as well. In fact, he's been into Gaza. We'll talk about him as well. Talk to him. We'll also talk about assisted dying with someone for and against it. In fact, someone who has stage 4 bowel cancer. And we'll get the latest on the weather. It is very hot here in London. I don't know what it's like where you are as well. Hit 32 today at Heathrow. Could it get even higher as time goes on? Let's get your comments on all those stories in the next hour here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is Drive. Thank you so much for your company here on Talk. Lots to discuss, including the assisted dying vote has gone through. It's heading to the Lords. They will probably amend it at some stage, but a narrow majority for that bill put forward by the Labour MP, Kemp. We'll talk as well about the Middle East, because not just in relation to what's happening there, the aid convoys that are going into Gaza, and of course so few people are actually reporting that, and Colonel Richard Kemp, who's a former British Army commander, we're going to talk to him in a second. Also, the British people who can't get out of Israel because the government isn't doing what it should be doing, as other governments have done. Germany, for example, Bulgaria, they've got their nationals out of Israel. Clearly a very dangerous place at the best of times, but particularly at the moment. We'll go live there in a second and reflect on what's happened in the UK. Pro-Palestinian protesters, vandals actually, damaging RAF planes at RAF Brize Norton. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about assisted dying, as I say, with someone who has stage 4 bowel cancer who is for assisted dying. We'll also take a look at the weather and this very strange story about BBC Breakfast. The presenter Naga Manchetti hauled in by bosses over allegation she bullied a junior staff member. We'll take a look inside the Sun before the end of the programme and talk to Kevin O'Sullivan, who'll be here between 7 and 9. I am, of course, back tomorrow between 10 and 1 and on Sunday at the same time as well. So there's loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here this evening on Talk Drive, so stay with me for all of that. Well, thank you to Clive in Solihull, who sent me a message on WhatsApp and says, great show as always, Peter. The Palestinian attack at Brize Norton was not a protest. It was an act of war, in my opinion. If and when they catch the perpetrators, they should either be deported or locked up for a very long time. I suspect neither of these will happen. Imagine if a white person vandalised a mosque. Starmer would lock them up and throw away the key. Lots to discuss with all of that. Keep your texts coming in on 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me, as I say, at talkTV as well. And the phone calls 0344 499 1000. I want to speak to Colonel Richard Kemp now. He's a former British Army commander. He is in Jerusalem. Richard, thank you for joining me this evening. There's so much to discuss, but before we get into the stories of the day, I know that you have been keeping a very close eye. I follow you on Twitter, and your videos and so on are fascinating. You have a great insight. You have wonderful connections as well to a lot that's going on. So much of what the British media is absolutely avoiding, not talking about, not highlighting, is the aid that is going in from Israel to Gaza. You know that, and have been looking into that a little bit, and I wonder if you could just tell me a bit about your experiences with that.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of talk about aid and deprivation of aid to the civilians population in Gaza of late. What the Israelis have done, together with the Americans, they have set up a new system for getting aid into Gaza to make sure that it gets in there, gets to the right people, and doesn't get hijacked, stolen, and used for their own purposes by Hamas, which has been happening all the way through this war. There's an organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has established so far 4 aid sites inside Gaza, which are secured by their own people, with the external perimeter secured by the IDF, or the Israeli Defense Force. And they deliver truckloads of aid into these locations, stockpile them in rows of boxes, and then the people in Gaza can come in and take the aid that they need without risking it going to Hamas. I was visiting one of these aid locations in Gaza the other day. I spoke to a lot of Palestinians who were coming through and collecting aid, many young people, a few women, some old people as well. But they were extremely pleased with what was happening. They were extremely pleased to be able to actually get their hands on aid without it going to Gaza, to Hamas. So I think it's a system. It's not perfect. It's not as comprehensive as it probably needs to be. I think they aim to deliver something like 2.5 million meals per day to Gazans inside the Gaza Strip. And so, yes, to my mind, it's working very well, and the Palestinian population is very, very pleased with it. Obviously, there are exceptions because there's never enough to go around, but it's I think, a good start.
There have been, of course, shootings. There have been violence around some of these, the distribution of aid in Gaza. I don't mean to trivialise this or be flippant about this in any way, but is that just inevitable, given the tense situation there, given how many guns are around, given how much Hamas doesn't want people to take the aid that Israel is giving them?
Yeah, and I mean, some of the people I spoke to, the ordinary Gazan civilians that I spoke to, and I spoke to probably 50 or 60 of them a few days back, 2 or 3 days ago, were saying that Hamas hates this new system because, as I said, it stops aid getting into their hands.
And Hamas have stolen so much of the aid, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a way they can control the population. And it's also a way for them to get money because they sell it, free aid, they sell it at a premium to the population in order to pay their terrorists and pay their recruits. But some of these people were telling me that Hamas hate it so much they were threatening. They've been threatening Gazan civilians, do not go and get aid from these places or you'll die. And I don't know if that's actually been carried out, if they've actually ended up killing any Gazans to go and get aid. But certainly they've told me it's a threat. And many people I spoke to, particularly the younger people, were saying, kill Hamas, down with Hamas, get rid of Hamas. And when they said this to me, there were cheers going up among the people nearby. So I think, it shows, two things. First of all, I think they also, by the way, many of them said, I love America, because they associate the aid with America, which is quite right, because much of it comes from America. But it shows two things. It shows that they're very grateful to get this aid, and it shows that they're sick and tired of Hamas. They know that Hamas brought this situation onto them, and they want rid of them.
Having been into Gaza, as so few people actually have, there are loads of commentators, I'm one of them, there are loads of journalists reporting about it, writing about it, giving their opinion about it. You've actually been there in recent days, unlike so many people who have these opinions. What is your assessment of how the Israelis are doing there? We'll maybe talk about Iran in a second, but what is your assessment in terms of how much Hamas has been defeated, how much of a threat they pose at the moment? Because there is this commentary that says that Hamas have been weakened to such a degree, Hezbollah have been weakened, the Houthis have been weakened, and that is why Netanyahu wants to target Iran. What is your thought on that?
Hamas have been very severely weakened over the last 19, 20 months, whatever it is, of this war. They've had many of their senior commanders killed. Some have been replaced, and their replacements have been killed. They're operating now not as organised units as they were before. They're now operating as individual terrorists or small groups, still hiding underground in some of the remaining tunnels, coming up to attack Israeli soldiers and sometimes succeeding in that. I think an Israeli soldier was killed, for example, yesterday, but they're well on their way to destruction. And I think it needs the staying power of Israel to do that. Of course, one of the big problems with Israel really even expanding its operations now is that Hamas still, of course, are holding hostages, and the Israelis need to be careful to minimize the death of hostages, minimize the likelihood of them actually hostage being killed as a result of Israeli military action. But also they remain, as they have been since the beginning, despite the popular view, they've been absolutely doing their best to minimize the deaths of innocent civilians in Gaza. And I've been into Gaza many times, and I've watched their operations myself. But I do think, I actually do believe that what I spoke about just now, the humanitarian aid, the new Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, I think could be a turning point, because it takes away the most important element of control that Hamas have over Gaza, which is control of food.
And you mentioned that control of food. UNRWA, of course, the UN agency working in Gaza, of which there were a number of Hamas terrorists actually working inside UNRWA, who were dual Hamas terrorists and UNRWA members. Some of them were exposed, some of them were not. I just wonder what your assessment of the United Nations is in regard to Gaza, because we're told and we're fed a diet of stories over and over again about, Israel's indiscriminately killing, there's a genocide, there's people starving and so on. I mean, a lot of that is propaganda, a lot of that is untrue, but I wonder, having been to Gaza on a number of occasions, including in the last few days, whether you could just go a bit further and paint an even starker picture than the brilliant one you have already in regard of what life is like for people there.
Yeah, I think the UN have played a very negative role in all of this. I mean, the UN for a start, and I've got personal experience of this with addressing the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva on a number of occasions. They're institutionally opposed to Israel. The UN, I think above all, does not want to see Israel succeed in this war. There are many members of UNRWA who are either cooperating with Hamas or indeed are Hamas terrorists themselves, and some of them were seen to have taken part in the October 2023 massacre inside Israel. They play a very negative role overall, and they for just a couple of quick examples of that. The first thing is, and I think this is very significant, is that UN have refused to countenance the idea that you could temporarily relocate Gazan citizens from Gaza into Egypt. They haven't been pushing for that at all. Egypt doesn't want it, but the UN doesn't want it either. This is the only conflict I've seen where the UN has resisted the idea of innocent civilians being able to get to safety in a neighboring country. And the second thing is this their negative perspective on the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. They've been refusing to cooperate with it. They have been condemning it. They've been criticizing it. And actually, there are two elements in Gaza that have been the strongest critics of this new initiative, and those are the United Nations and Hamas, which I think in itself tells a big story.
Yes, it does. From your position, a former British Army commander as a colonel, what do you think will happen in regard to the Middle East? What is your instinct in terms of where America is with Iran, what Netanyahu wants to do, and whether there could be some wider, I mean, there already is a regional conflict, but a wider regional conflict, perhaps involving the Americans in a more, in a heavier involvement from them and perhaps us in the UK as well?
Yeah, well, the Israelis have done extraordinary work, as you will have seen inside Iran in the last week. They've achieved incredible results, both in terms of writing down the regime, killing large numbers of military commanders inside Iran, and doing severe damage to both the Iranian nuclear program. It's not completed yet, but it's on the way, and to the Iranian offensive missile capabilities. And we've seen phenomenal success. The Israeli Air Force has as much freedom over the skies of Tehran as it does over Tel Aviv. And the Iranians have proved themselves to be extremely weak. They fired something like, well, we lost count exactly now, but it's something like 400 to 450 ballistic missiles, very big missiles, size of a bus, half a ton of explosives on board. They fired something like 500 of them into Israel. One of them hit a mosque this morning in Haifa. Another one hit a hospital yesterday in Beersheba. Most of them which have landed have hit densely populated areas. All of the people killed, about 25 now, have been civilians, all of them. And actually, although every one of those deaths is a tragedy, it's a minimal achievement for Iran, given the weight of ballistic missiles that it's fired. So I think Iran overall is on the ropes. Whether President Trump will come in and maybe deliver the coup de grace to the Iranian nuclear system by dropping a bunker buster bomb on Fordo, or more than one, we wait to see. I think it would be desirable for the United States to do that, to not completely necessary, but largely terminate Iran's nuclear missile program, nuclear weapons program. But I'm not sure it's absolutely essential. I think if he doesn't choose to do that, then Israel can still do hugely significant damage on its own. As for a wider conflict, I think there is a bit of a risk of that. If the US does engage in Iran, then there are Iranian proxies in Iraq which could target and have said they will target American troop bases and other facilities inside Iraq, which would obviously be something of an expansion. But beyond that, obviously Iran also could fire its ballistic missiles into oil installations in countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE. That could happen. And if that did, I think if any of those scenarios occurred, I think that would probably unleash President Trump's fury even more and would guarantee that he would get involved, or I would guess so.
I just want to ask you quickly about two other things. One about the British people stuck in Israel and the reaction or inaction, perhaps, of the Foreign Office in terms of actually getting them out. Presumably the MOD would be the one sending flights, or we've been told now they'll be put on commercial flights when the airspace opens. But that's not going to make much of a difference, is it? Because once the airspace opens, they could get on commercial flights anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously there's going to be a big backlog for those commercial companies, whatever they are. And actually British Airways hasn't been flying into Israel for a considerable time now. El Al, I think, has been the main way of conveying people between, that's the Israeli airline, between Israel and the UK. So yes, there is a big problem there. There are some people, including El Al itself, this airline has actually started to operate ships moving between Israel and Cyprus, so they can take people out from Cyprus. And there are other companies, I think, doing something similar. But as far as I'm aware, I've not really kept in touch with what the British government's been doing, actually.
Sure. Well, they're saying now that they will be sending flights when the airspace is open. And just finally, Richard, if I could ask you about these pro-Palestinian thugs and vandals who've been damaging RAF planes at Brize Norton. First of all, totally ridiculous and unspeakable that they should do that. But of course, the wider question has to be asked, as well as that condemnation, of how on earth they got into somewhere like Brize Norton in the first place in order to be able to do this, and then with impunity putting this footage that we're seeing on the screen now online.
Yeah, it is staggering that these people could get in, damage aircraft, and get out without being detected. It actually is beyond belief for a very, very important military base like Brize Norton. The planes that were damaged are air-to-air refueling aircraft, which are very important to British defences. It's not just a protest. This is direct sabotage. And the fact that it could happen right now is even more disturbing, because we're now, the UK is one of the top targets for terrorist attacks by Iran. We've seen recent arrests of 7 Iranians just a few weeks back, of 7 Iranians planning some form of attack within the UK. And Iran has sleeper cells in the UK and other European countries to carry out terrorist attacks in the event of an attack by Israel or the US on Iran. So exactly this situation, they exist. We know they exist. Security should have been even tougher. And that's before you even think about Russia. Russia hates the UK. Russia sees the UK
and has attacked us on our own soil on many, many occasions. Yeah,
have done so, and there's no reason why they shouldn't do so again unless they're stopped. And it's very, very disturbing to see that in this, particularly right now, this very heightened security situation over Iran and, of course, Ukraine, Russia as well, that this could have happened. It beggars belief, and I think something needs to be done. Yeah, okay. Certainly security on all military installations in the UK should be tightened up if they're not tight enough now.
Well, we'll see what the Defence Secretary has to say. I expect he'll address Parliament on Monday. Colonel Richard Kemp, former British Army commander, thank you for joining us on Talk. I learned an awful lot from that interview, as I always do when I speak to Richard Kemp. Lots to discuss on all of this. Let me know your thoughts on what Richard said there. 0344 499 1000. In a second, we're going to talk to a stage 4 bowel cancer patient who is for assisted dying, and to Tom Hunt, the former Conservative MP who's against it. He works for one of the organisations against it, and get your views too as well. Let me know what they are. Stay with us.
It's a very, very large airfield with fences all around the outside, and it's conceivable that they turned up, cut the fence and got in.
Well, that shouldn't be able to happen, though, should it?
Well, you'd like to think that it couldn't happen. Certainly during a war, you would not want special forces nipping over the fence and doing worse.
No,
but what I would say with these guys, they're jolly lucky that they, because there is lethal forces available. I mean, obviously not against people who aren't a lethal threat, but they should be very, very careful.
But it could happen.
It could if a mistake was made, yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Rob makes a really good point on WhatsApp. He says, Peter, why is invading an RAF base to sabotage planes not terrorism? If you can incarcerate Lucy Connolly so quickly, then this government could also prescribe the group as terrorists and the act as terrorism quickly. I don't think they can do that retrospectively, Rob. But being right-wing and saying hurdy words is far more serious than illegally entering an RAF base and disabling RAF planes. This government will do nothing as they're all sympathisers with the sabotage's actions and thinking. Well, in fairness to Keir Starmer, he has said it's disgraceful and something that shouldn't have happened, Rob, but I think a lot of people will agree with what you're saying there. Debbie says, send the Palestine Action people to Gaza. If they're that passionate about the cause, they can protest there. Barry says, sounds to me that those protesters knew that they would have little difficulty getting to the flight line at Brize Norton. It's a huge embarrassment for the RAF police, but frankly, they need a wake-up call. And on tools being stolen, thank you to Bob in Cheltenham, who says, in relation to Matt Vickers MP, I agree tradesmen and women are the backbone of the country, but surely anyone who leaves their expensive items in their car or van overnight on a public street is personally responsible for taking that risk. Don't the councils and the police already have enough to do already? Instead of rooting around at car boot sales, the nature of the loss is already taken into consideration by the courts when sentencing, whether it's sentimental loss or financial loss beyond the loss of the goods themselves. What do you think about that? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Great show as always, says Bob, and thank you. And Max in Warwickshire has also sent a nice message in all of that. The big debate today, really interesting week actually, because we've had that big change on the abortion legislation. I know Julia had a lot to say and talk about on that the other day. Big debate that was had in Parliament and on this station as well. But the huge issue today, of course, is assisted dying. And I want to speak to Tom Hunt about this, who is a former Conservative MP. He's also part of an organisation campaigning against assisted dying. Tom, you must be disappointed today. Do you think there's any way back on this now that it goes to the House of Lords?
I mean, naturally, I'm disappointed in the sense that I wanted the bill to be defeated today. I did think there was I always had some hope that it might be. Sadly, that wasn't the case. However, we have seen a fairly dramatic drop in support for the bill. At second reading, it had a majority of 55. That majority is now 23. The bill's lost its working majority in the House of Commons. In fact, I'm struggling to find a historical precedent where a private member's bill has drained so much support between second reading and third reading. So we're talking about a bill here which I think has been very much exposed in the last few months, and it is limping to the House of Lords. I think the House of Lords are going to be looking at this bill, which of course wasn't in any party's manifesto. It's lost significant support from second reading to third reading, and it has a narrowest of majorities. And of course, this is a bill that touches the lives of some of the most vulnerable people in our society. And I think that the House of Lords will be right to treat the bill robustly and to ask some very searching questions.
In terms of what the actual votes in all of this, so we're down to quite a slim majority in the House of Commons. Why did your campaign and the MPs who were against this, why do you think they failed to convince a majority of MPs to vote against this?
Well, I mean, as I just said, I can't think of another example where there's been a private member's bill that's had a majority of 55. And
they still lost it though. There's still a lot of people who feel this bill, even as amended, is the right thing to go forward though, Tom, didn't they?
Well, look, we have an arithmetic at the moment in Parliament with over 400 Labour MPs, which is probably about as favourable as it's ever going to be for those people who want this sort of law. So it is a challenging arithmetic for people to work with who are opposed to this bill. So we've got a process. The process has not ended, and ultimately, if you're somebody who feels as though this bill is going to put vulnerable people at risk, not a single disability organisation supports this bill. anorexic people can still qualify for it. We've had a poll this week showing that domestic abuse, significant concerns about domestic abuse. So I mean, why would people suddenly sit back and say, oh well, that's it? It's passed by an incredibly narrow majority of 23. We should accept that. I don't think that is where most of us are.
Although, 50+1 is a majority. Tom, thank you for your thoughts. That's Tom Hunt there, former Conservative MP who is against assisted dying. I want to talk to Nathaniel Dye, MBE, who is a stage 4 bowel cancer patient. Nathaniel, I know that you went to the march in London as well in favour of this. Why do you feel, especially as someone in your, and I'm so sorry that the situation you're going through is happening, why do you feel so strongly about this? Nathaniel,
well, quite simply, we're talking about the terminally ill adults. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. I think there's a bit of a delay, but go ahead.
Testing,
go.
1,
no,
2.
You're there.
How's
You're there.
that?
Go ahead, Nathaniel.
Lovely. Well, this is the terminally ill adults end of life bill, and I'm a terminally ill adult. So simply all we ask is for choice at the end of life, for there to be a compassionate death that affects absolutely no one else but dying people in our families. And today was a day where Parliament has, for the second time, spoken decisively with a working majority. I mean, your last caller is factually incorrect and at best clutching at enough straws, in my opinion. He's probably got enough for a scarecrow by now. In reality, this is a day in which Parliament has said, let us have compassion for dying people like me at their very most vulnerable. And one thing that I think some opponents have done is try to drive a wedge between disabled people like me as well. I'm definitely disabled. For example, I've got a stoma. All sorts of things limit me now. And driving a wedge between vulnerable groups. And I can tell you what's made me vulnerable in particular is suffering, that I've caught a glimpse of what, of how bad it can get at the end of life. I've been through horrible surgery. I've been through all sorts. I can tell you that there's no greater vulnerability than that kind of suffering. And I can say, despite that, I've still remained able to make decisions for myself.
Nathaniel,
and it's the most patronising thing as a dying person to be told that.
Nathaniel,
that maybe I don't have the agency.
Well, you're clearly a very intelligent man who's thought this through. You've thought about this from every angle. You're dealing with a horrendous set of circumstances that I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. I just wonder if people aren't as compos mentis as you, if they're not people who have thought about this from all angles, are you not worried that some people could be maybe not coerced necessarily into it, but certainly maybe could be nudged in a direction they wouldn't be particularly happy about? Are you happy that the safeguards are there to make sure that the person themselves will make the final decision?
I mean, in short, absolutely. Not just from safeguards that were in the bill originally, but I mean, I sat through about 9 hours of 90 in committee scrutiny. I'll never get that back. It was really boring, but it did show me how carefully considered this bill is. So, for example, mental capacity is assessed by 2 doctors a week apart, independently of each other. So, for a start, if someone was considered, as in, to use your phrase, not so compos mentis, they would not be able to access assisted dying. And more than that, people who are in vulnerable groups. I mean, unfortunately, I've been in a coercive relationship where, honestly, I left it, and I'm very lucky to have left it, feeling like I was living a poor version of someone else's life, like my decisions weren't my own anymore. But despite that, in the worst times of that, I still had in my head that ability to decide for myself. So I've been there. I know what that's been like, and I can say that would not be, in my personal case anyway, I can only speak for myself. That would not be enough.
Yes.
For that decision to be accepted. That's from personal experience.
And this would be your decision, Nathaniel, of course, under this legislation. I just wonder what your family and friends think about it. Are they supportive, or would they be, or have they sounded any note of caution in regard to it? What have their attitudes been, your loved ones?
Well, my loved ones, I have 4 siblings, and celebrating MBE Day earlier this year was maybe one of the most special times of my. Thank you very much. I mean, charity work, etc. What can I say? And that was so special. And it's honestly, it's just quite strange. Me dying has brought us together. But I mean, every single decision I make, I run through them, because ultimately they're having to lose me, and that's bad enough. But every single loved one has been completely in support, and more than that, not just me, but the only documented case of coercion and legal restrictions in the world has been loved ones imploring the person who's dying to stay alive that little bit longer, so they can stay together that little bit longer, to maybe just about make it to a special event or a birthday or something. And that's the reality about assisted dying as seen all over the world.
Okay.
So I know which coercion I would be susceptible to myself. Okay. I want to live. I don't want to die.
Okay, thank you.
But I will.
Thank you so much. I wish you all the very best, Nathaniel. I really appreciate you speaking to us today. That's Nathaniel Dye, MBE. He is a stage 4 bowel cancer patient. What do you think about all this? Who are you persuaded by? We've heard a number of voices against it. We've heard Nathaniel make a really, really strong viewpoint there in favour of it. He is a stage 4 bowel cancer patient. What do you make of this? Who's right in all of this? What should Parliament do? Now the Lords are going to have a look at this. What are your thoughts? 0344 499 1000. Mark has been in touch and says, surely this assisted dying bill has lost traction because of who it caters for. How many people get given only 6 months to live? That's a decimal number for sure. And then look at how many others have to be involved to sign off on it. Approval from 2 doctors, a panel including a psychiatrist, social worker, senior lawyer. Yeah, right, that'll be concluded after my 6 months to live prognosis, more like 6 years later. The detail indicates it's a pointless bill, says Mark. Stuart says, why is it we can be humane and put animals out of pain and suffering, but we don't have the same compassion for people, says Stuart in Gainsborough. Stuart, that's a very good point, but I think the point that I would make in response to that is that animals can't indicate the decision they want to make. Well, maybe they can, but not to the same degree. They can't talk to us. They can't tell us exactly how they feel and that they've made a sentient decision to end their life. It's a different set of circumstances. Lots of people getting in touch about the RAF as well, and about Gaza and the Middle East. Also, in regard to tool theft, Stephen says, in response to the person who questioned leaving tools in a van on your street, some like me have had their tools stolen from the back of a van in a hotel car park whilst working away. There's only so much you can actually do. There are, of course, many thoughts on all of this, and I know there are loads of tradesmen who listen to this programme. Let me know your thoughts. What's your experience been on all of this, or anything we're talking about, or indeed you think we should be talking about? We'll take some of your calls next, and the number to get on the air before 7 o'clock when Kev takes over, of course, is 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Tom in Cheltenham has been in touch with a message saying they should charge them with sabotage and not vandalism because that would carry a far greater sentence and put their mates off doing similar. That is in regard to what has happened at RAF Brize Norton. John in Wokingham, I've spoken to John before, I know he's certainly not woke in Wokingham. John, what do you make of this? It's pretty scandalous, I think.
Well, it's absolutely ridiculous. Surely it's got to be a terrorist attack, hasn't it? How can they get into one of the most secure bases in Oxfordshire on e-scooters and go and spray most top-of-the-range fighters we've got in the UK?
But that to me, it's the audacious nature of what they did. Yeah. They, of course, filmed it, they put it online, they essentially, presumably, I haven't examined the footage in any great depth, but they'll know where that came from, they'll know who was involved with that. They don't care. They think they can get away with it.
But good job it wasn't bombs they put into the aircraft engines rather than red paint.
Exactly, it's a massive red flag, John. It really is a major security breach, isn't it?
But we seem to be losing control of our borders, though, don't we? So why don't we send the Navy down to Dunkirk to start shooting a few boats before they get to the taxi service in Calais?
Well, I mean, I'd be happy for them to puncture the boats. I don't want anybody in them, of course, to be injured. But I do worry that, you know, the RAF, the first line of defence, really, or one of the final lines of defence, I suppose. But this is really, really worrying, John. And the government just doesn't seem to be able to secure these places.
No, we don't. We've got the best armed forces in the world, and we seem to be losing control of everything.
Yeah. John, good thoughts there. Thanks for them. John in Wokingham. Benji's in London and has given me a ring. 0344 499 1000. Benji, what do you make of all this? Benji, are you there? Hi.
Hi. I think it's extraordinary, to be honest, because I firstly think it's extraordinary that this was even able to happen, that they were able to breach security of a military base in such a way. But I also think it's extraordinary that they're even doing this, because the only RAF so-called involvement in what's going on against Hamas in Gaza is to look for hostages. So if they have such a problem with looking for hostages, then obviously they don't really care about the Arabs in Gaza, because the quicker the hostages are freed, the quicker the war may end.
Oh, they don't understand anything. They don't understand what it's like. I mean, we saw those pro-Palestinian protests last weekend, people waving Iranian flags. I mean, if you're in solidarity with the people of Iran who want to get rid of the regime, fair enough. But I'm not sure that's the case. I'm not sure people actually understand. I mean, they're literally standing with a nation by flying that flag. They're standing with the nation and a regime, throws gay people off buildings, doesn't allow women to have jobs or the freedoms they need. I mean, the thing is that so many people in that march, not all of them, but so many people in that march need to be asked two questions. Two questions really, really simply, Benji. Number one, what would you do about Hamas if you were Israel? Number two, the other question I think that is very, very important to ask them is, name me one thing, just one thing you think Israel has ever done right.
I 100% agree with you, and especially on the Iranian point, because even just before, people protesting against the regime outside the embassy were attacked. And these people, they don't know what they're protesting for. They're protesting against the interests of the Iranian people for sure, and essentially, by arguing in support of Hamas, they're arguing also in support of continued atrocities against Israel, which leads to war for the Arabs that they claim that they care so much about. So yes, they are useful idiots, quote unquote, but it's much worse when you think that there are IRGC operatives in the UK who would want to tear down this country, and many of these protesters have just as much problem with Britain as they do with Israel.
And they're doing the work. Well, you're absolutely right. We don't need the IRGC, the Iranian operatives in this country. We don't need the Russians in this country to sabotage things, or the Chinese, or to have a cyber attack. All you need are these people born here who are pro-Palestinian activists who think they're doing the right thing, and they're useful idiots, as you correctly say, to go into Brize Norton and I mean, those no matter what happens, those aircraft will be grounded for a short or perhaps longer period of time when they assess what the damage actually is. They're weakening our defences in a way that a foreign hostile state could only dream of.
Exactly, and the reason for that is because they are against Britain. They are hostile to Britain. But for some reason, it's very politically controversial to say that, and to say that these protesters are against British values. But it's clear that they are time after time when they're attacking British assets. It's not an IAF base that they attacked today. It was the RAF, where there's been little involvement with Israel because of the war. And the only involvement is looking for hostages, which I think is a moral thing to try and find hostages. I don't know how anyone could disagree with that and then say they care about life and stopping attacking civilians is what they'd say.
Benji, I agree with every word. Ring me anytime. Thank you for your thoughts. Benji in London there, 0344 499 1000. On assisted dying, John in Market Drayton says it's not about family and friends. It's about the individual being allowed to make his or her decision on their life. Take the relatives' emotions out of the choice. Well, listen, people are influenced by all sorts of different people, and I don't think these things and a decision on that scale would be made in isolation necessarily, John. So I think there's maybe a wee bit more to it. Brad in Cambridge says, as someone who lived with chronic illness for more than 5 years, so sorry to hear that, Brad, I 100% support this bill despite the concerns. It has to be a human right to say enough is enough when things become unbearable, says Brad. Jane has said, if this incident in Brize Norton happened while the Tories were in power, they would have been forced to come to the House, make an urgent statement. Labour, nothing as usual. They never get any scrutiny on anything. In fairness, Jane, the Ministry of Defence have put out a statement on this. I will see if I can find it. Certainly what has happened is that they are saying anyway that they're dealing with this. I'm not so sure they're actually getting to the bottom of it. The group said the activists who entered RAF Brize Norton used repurposed fire extinguishers to spray red paint onto the plane's engines. An MOD spokeswoman said, our armed forces represent the very best of Britain. They put their lives on the line for us, and their display of duty, dedication and selfless personal sacrifice are an inspiration to us all. It is our responsibility to support those who defend us. Well, that doesn't say very much, does it? Lord West, who was the Labour Minister for Security, Alan West, and the former head of the Royal Navy, said he was not aware of the full details at the time he made these comments, but he said the break-in was extremely worrying. We can't allow things like this to happen at all. And he said the breaches were really a problem for national security. That is Lord West there, who spoke to the BBC a little bit earlier. We've got a voice note from Bill in Angus on Brize Norton. This is what Bill has to say.
Surely we should be going for civil recovery for the damages that's been caused to these aircraft engines. I would think normal people would be bankrupt, and probably the families and their families' would be bankrupt as well. I think that would give them a wake-up call. What do you think?
Bill, totally agree with you. Let's get them convicted in the criminal courts first for this criminal damage, or, I mean, I'm sure there are higher charges with longer sentences. We had a suggestion there from Tom in Cheltenham about sabotage rather than vandalism, that was what he said they should be charged with. It'd be very interesting to find out what they will actually be charged with when they're tracked down, as I'm sure they will be. Then getting the money back, very good idea as well in the civil courts, Bill. I just think that would be something that would be a really good idea, so I entirely agree with you. Steve in East Yorkshire says, I'm not sure if anyone has mentioned this, but the RAF aircraft damaged by the pro-Hamas idiots could have been used to return British people from Israel rather than the government having to use expensive charter aircraft. Steve, I did mention that a little bit earlier in the programme, but it's a point worth making again. Absolutely, and thank you so much for doing so, Steve. I appreciate that. On assisted dying, loads of people getting in touch, including Susan, who says, I nursed my husband through terminal cancer when he was 40. He never gave up hope and never said he wanted to end his suffering, which was horrific. My concern would be that given the right to die, he would have felt pressured to choose that option to save his family or prolonged suffering. He was ill for 2 years. His biggest concern was us. I remember saying at the time that we wouldn't let our dog suffer as much, but now I think we could risk reducing the value of a human life to the level of animal life. I think that is wrong, says Susan. Susan, thank you for such an honest message and sending me a message about undoubtedly the toughest thing in your life that you have faced. I really appreciate your honesty. I appreciate the nuance and the intelligence that you have in that message, and I wish you and your family very, very well. I'm so sorry to hear about your husband. It is a very, very difficult debate. It is something that we We'll debate here between now and 7. If you want to get your voice on the air, please do let me know. 0344 499 1000 is the number to give me a ring on. And we will add perhaps a little bit of much needed sunshine to your life in a second, because these are serious debates, they're important debates, we'll continue to have them, but let's bring a smile to our face and talk about the weather and the sunshine that is out there and what's coming next with my favourite weather forecaster, Jo Wheeler. She will be with us in a second.
You know what I'd do with them? I'd send them back to where they've come from, British citizens or not. I'd strip them of their British citizenship, because this is treason, and I'd send them back to wherever they've come from. But the point is, this is not, as you say, like we get on a daily basis outside Parliament, just, you know, your professional protesters. These are hardcore criminals that are committing treason and need to be treated very, very severely.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
One thing we never lose sight of on this station is that we're not the London-centric media. We're quite the opposite. Yes, I'm sitting here in London, but 82% of our viewers and listeners live outside London, whether they're in other parts of the UK, whether they're around the world. We are not talking about London, we're talking about the whole country. However, all I know, of course, is where I live in London and where I'm sitting at the moment in London. It is a beautiful day. It's been lovely for the last few days, and in fact I was up in Staffordshire yesterday interviewing the Prime Minister, and it was a scorcher. It was extremely hot, and poor old Ryan, the producer, had a bit of an eyeful when I was changing my shirt about 7 minutes before the programme. Ryan's just said in my ear that he liked it. Well, listen, each to their own, got to give the people what they want. I will not be taking my shirt off on this programme. Nobody needs to see that, but there was this very odd spectacle getting back to the office about 10 minutes before the programme. Usually I like to get in at least an hour and a half before the programme, read everything, talk to everybody, see what's going on, of course, and I'll have read and listened to a load of stuff at home. But I was racing from Staffordshire, where it was absolutely boiling. I was drenched in sweat, and thankfully I had thought ahead and brought another shirt, which the identical one to the one I was interviewing the Prime Minister in, changed into that, and here I was on the programme. So that's, I'm sure, more of a mental image than you have ever wanted. But what the point I'm making is, it's warm. It's warm in Staffordshire, it's warm in London, it's warm in many, many parts of the country. We're having a bit of a heat wave at the moment. I think it was 32 degrees, although that's found out precisely at Heathrow today, the warmest temperature recorded, I think. But Jo Wheeler will tell us the facts, as she always does. My favourite meteorologist, and to be brutally honest, just a wonderful person. Jo is a meteorologist, a square raindrop. Jo, what's going on? What's happening? How long can we expect this? What's going to happen over the weekend? Tell us the whole thing.
Well, I will. First and foremost, the definition of a heat wave, because some places will have met that definition, others won't. And it won't surprise you to know it's complicated. It involves getting to a certain temperature for 3 consecutive days. The problem is, those temperatures differ. Once you go from the southeast parts of London, which I think is 28, then the temperatures drop as you go out in concentric circles. So in some places, having 27 degrees for 3 consecutive days is a heat wave. In other places, no, you need 28. I think certainly some places will have reached heat wave criteria today, because we've seen quite a lot of places, including Newcastle, reaching 30 degrees Celsius. And we haven't reached the peak yet. That's likely to happen tomorrow. But almost simultaneously, as we see those temperatures peaking in the southeast, we're likely to see some slightly cooler and fresher conditions starting to make their way in from the west, with, as you might expect, some thunderstorms, and those look like being pretty potent tomorrow. There's a yellow warning out for much of northern England. But before we ever get there, we've got the prospect of what they call a tropical night. Now, again, this has a definition, 20 degrees Celsius. Anywhere where the temperature doesn't fall below 20 degrees Celsius overnight is a tropical night. And I'm guessing, Peter, actually, that you don't have much trouble sleeping given all your travelling and what time you're up.
Certainly not last night, let me tell you. It was, as soon as my head hit the pillow. But yes, certainly when it's really hot, it can be very, very difficult to sleep, and sometimes keep the window open or put a fan on or whatever.
Yeah, I think tonight will be quite uncomfortable for most people. Even those areas that don't have temperatures holding up at 20 degrees Celsius will see values in the mid to late teens. So a very warm and sticky night. And I think by the time things start to change tomorrow, we'll actually be quite glad of it. So these thunderstorms coming up from the southwest, pushing their way northeastwards, northern England affected most. The southeast may well stay dry, and they could potentially be looking at 34 degrees Celsius. That would be 93 degrees Fahrenheit if it happens.
And how does this compare to, I think it was 2022, when things got crazy. I mean, it was about 40 degrees at that stage, wasn't it? So we're not quite there yet, and hopefully we won't get there, because that's just uncomfortably hot, really.
Yes, that was actually recorded very close to me at RAF Coningsby, 40.3 Celsius, I think, the highest temperature ever recorded. No, we haven't got there yet. Of course, tomorrow is the summer solstice, the longest day of the year and the first day of astrological summer. Follow all of that. So we've got more daylight tomorrow than we do on pretty much any other day of the year. So you would expect it to be warmer than not. But we just happen to be in this situation where we're pulling up a lot of warm air. It is from the south. There is a slight complication to that. And if you get a chance, watch the Met Office video, because it's fascinating. This air actually originated close to Greenland, in Labrador, underwent changes, and it's brought us this little kick over the weekend to push those temperatures up further. But in essence, we've got low pressure out towards the west and high pressure to the east. So both of those are driving a southerly flow. And if you've got friends or relatives who are in Spain and Portugal at the moment, they'll verify the fact that it's very warm there at the moment.
Certainly, and into next week, so that it'll sort of break tomorrow then for most people. These thunderstorms will be there, and then we'll get a little bit of relief from the heat. Tell us what's going to happen into next week then, Joe.
Well, once this high pressure to the east of us starts to slide away, things become more unsettled. We have what we call a mobile westerly, which is what is most prevalent in this country. The weather goes from west to east. We get these weather systems coming off the Atlantic. In summer, they're not as frequent or as violent as they are in winter, but in essence, areas of rain followed by sunshine and showers, you know, the typical kind of thing. And intermittently, we get a bit of a ridge of high pressure. Now, of course, we started the year with this blocking high. Now, a blocking high is one that isn't going anywhere at all very fast. It gave us, I think, the sunniest spring on record and 4 more hours of sunlight than we had in 2020. Now, that high pressure didn't want to go anywhere. We've seen high pressure come back, as indeed this one that's moving away from the east at the moment. But they tend to come and they tend to go. So we're going to see things slightly more unsettled. Things do get cooler and fresher from the west over the weekend. But down in the southeast, we still seem to hang on to some fairly warm air. So I don't think it's going to get chilly. I don't think you need to reach for your jumper yet. Possibly not even your umbrella, but it will become a little more unsettled.
My very good friend Meyer Wolf has his birthday tomorrow. I think he'll be 85 tomorrow, actually, and his birthday is on the 21st of June, which, as you correctly say, is the summer solstice longest day of the year. He's quite a confident person, has lots of opinions, likes to hear, be heard. It'll be a shock that he's a friend of mine and that we're similar in any way. But Joe, as I often said to him, you know, it was no coincidence that I was born on the 21st of June, so that was the day where most sunshine could be on his face, that he could be clear and forthright and all of that. Have you been enjoying the weather, Joe? Has it been good?
Well, it's my job, so actually I've been in front of a computer watching
right.
chasing the cloud, where if there is any, and chasing the showers. But I must admit, I've looked out a couple of times. The dog's inside, which tells me it's probably too hot for me to be out there as well.
Absolutely. Well, you always chase the clouds away from me, Joe. Thank you for your wonderful contribution there. That's Joe Wheeler there. He's a meteorologist with Square Raindrop. She's also sometimes a political commentator. He's on my debate desk on Saturdays and Sundays, and my show, of course, is on between 10 and 1 every Saturday and Sunday. I'll be back here tomorrow morning. Lots to discuss tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including the person who says, where were the guards monitoring the CCTV at Brize Norton? An alarm can be set to sound when the cameras pick up any movement, even in the dark. And Rodney in Crowthorne says, if anything at all positive can be gained from the stupid act at Brize Norton is to highlight the current inadequate security at these military bases, says Rodney. He also says it's a great show. Rodney, thank you. That's a very, very good point. We always have to take the positives out of things, as you correctly say. We're going to talk to Philip Ingram in a second. He's a former senior military intelligence officer, about all of this. And we'll check in with my friend Lee Scott. Lee is a former Conservative MP. He's a great friend of mine. We worked together at one stage, and he is in Israel. Could he actually get out? Because he was meant to leave last weekend. He was over for his grandson's bar mitzvah. Lots to discuss in the next hour between now and 7. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Drive with Peter Cardwell. Great to be with you. Thank you so much for your company. There's loads to discuss, including pro-Palestinian protesters, vandals really, damaging RAF planes at Brize Norton. What punishment should they receive? People talking about sabotage, terrorism charges. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts. Also about British people stuck in Israel. We'll speak to one of them. The Foreign Office says they will get flights moving, but only when airspace opens. What's the point of that? Surely the point is to get them out now. We'll talk as well about the protesters attacked outside the Iranian embassy. 6 people arrested there. A little bit later on, we'll talk about the BBC breakfast presenter Naga Munchetty. She's been hauled in by bosses over allegations she bullied a junior staffer and made an off-air sex jibe. Also, her boss, the editor of BBC Breakfast, is on an extended period of leave. What on earth is happening there? Felicity Cross, the deputy TV editor of The Sun, will be with us in a minute or two talking about that. And we'll take a greater look actually inside the paper as well, because they have a number of stories tomorrow you're definitely going to want to read, including about Meghan's latest wine, not W-H-I-N-E, but W-I-N-E. This is a pink booze, a rosé from Napa Valley in California, and she has said that it is, what is it, infused with vim and vigour, some bizarre phrase anyway. We will talk about that a little bit later on. Loads to discuss. I want to discuss it with you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Pick up the phone, give me a ring, let me know your thoughts, or send me a voice note on that number as well. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message on the main number 0344 499 1000. You can text me, normal text message 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. Loads of ways to get in touch, and of course this is my show, but it's your show too. I want to make sure that you get your thoughts across, so do give me a shout between now and 7, and stay tuned here on Talk. On the weather as well, we've been talking about that. Talked before the break with Joe Wheeler from Square Raindrop about that. Margaret says we don't often get decent weather in the UK. People should stop complaining. And Artie says it's warm weather. Why can't people just enjoy it instead of moaning about it? I'm certainly not moaning. It's a little bit too hot for me. I would say around 25 is sort of where I want to be. But nonetheless, certainly I think it is beautiful to see the clear skies here in London anyway. I know it's different in different parts of the country, but certainly, as Joe was telling us, it's probably going to break tomorrow, and then we'll see what happens in the next few days. Lots to discuss, including the pro-Palestinian vandals damaging RAF planes at Brize Norton. Brize Norton is one of the main RAF bases in this country. It's meant to be an incredibly secure place. So people got in, these scumbags got in and started vandalising the planes that are meant to keep us all safe. Philip Ingram is a former senior military intelligence officer. Philip, how on earth did this happen? Obviously, it's totally to be condemned that they did it in the first place, but there must be a lot of red faces at the Ministry of Defence at the moment.
More than red faces, there's a lot of people that have to be held to account. This is a complete abject failure in the station command and the ability to keep what is a vital asset for the UK secure. You know, how they've got through so many layers of security that you've got around these places shows a level of complacency that is bordering on the criminal by those that should be keeping it secure.
What sort of accountability do you think they will have? What will be happening now in the RAF to try and find out exactly what happened and how it was allowed to happen?
Well, those that control the gate and patrol the perimeter and all the rest of it are contractors. So the contractors will be being held to account, but it's the station commander that's responsible for the overall security of the base, and the station commander will have a security officer that is almost certainly from the RAF's police and security unit, the PNSS, and they've got a unit based there. And there's not just the physical fences, but there's a number of electronic fences as well that should have triggered alarms before these people got anywhere near any active aircraft. And of course, it's not just vandalism. When you're breaking into a site that is vital like this, you're bordering on sabotage. I'm not a legal expert when it comes to this. There's a lot of debate going on social media, but they've overstepped the mark.
Yeah, certainly sabotage, terrorism charges, all sorts of issues coming up, and it'll be very, very interesting in regard to Palestine action. And actually, we've had a breaking line here, let me tell you right now. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, is going to move to prescribe Palestine Action, this group, in the coming weeks, effectively branding them a terrorist organisation. Yvette Cooper is preparing a written statement before Parliament on Monday, which, if passed, will make becoming a member of the group illegal. It will then need to be enacted through new legislation. I think this is a good idea. Do you think this? What do you think yourself, Philip?
I think it's a very good idea. The trouble is with a lot of these naive individuals that join these groups, they don't realise who it is that's funding them, that's motivating them behind closed doors. And it'll almost certainly be elements of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Quds Force that operate out of the Iranian embassy, that will be behind this as well, because they are emboldening those that are Hamas supporters, Hezbollah supporters, Houthi supporters, under this guise of Palestine Action. None of those organisations represent the Palestinians, and none of the Arab nations want anything to do with the Palestinians that come out of Gaza that are ruled by the terror organisations. So this is a very sensible thing. And once it's been prescribed, that means that the individuals can be then dealt with under the Terrorism Act. That gives the police hugely more powers to monitor what it is that they're planning and then to deal with them once they get caught.
I know neither of us is a lawyer, but presumably it would be impossible to retrospectively charge the people under terror legislation from today. That would be my understanding anyway. But any future acts from Palestine Action, if they are prescribed, well, they could be charged under terrorism legislation because they'd be members of a prescribed organisation.
Yes, I think if it comes down to the membership of a prescribed organisation, whether the actions at Brize Norton cross the line to allow them to be charged with terror-related charges or charges under the new National Security Acts or something else, I'm sure there's something more than just vandalism that they can be hit with. And I hope they are.
Well, me too. We'll see what happens. Just in regard to the protesters attacked outside the Iranian embassy in London with 6 arrested, just talk us through what happened there, Philip.
Well, from what I understand, there were protesters outside the Iranian embassy, and then individuals that support the Grand Ayatollah came out and attacked those protesters, leaving some of them quite severely injured. And it seems that the police were not in a position to try and stop these attacks. This is a very worrying start, as we get growing tensions in the Middle East. If we're starting to see, the Iranian regime attacking the anti-Iranian regime in our country and other countries. Again, the Revolutionary Guards Corps, the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps, their Quds Force have operatives and sleeper cells all around different countries around the world, and it's them that will be behind the attacks on these protesters.
We're going to talk to someone in Israel in just a second, my friend Lee. And Philip, I just wonder, before we do that, if you could give me your assessment of how you believe the Foreign Office has dealt with people like Lee, British people stranded in Israel. They're saying now they're going to get a flight when Israel airspace opens again. But we've seen what Bulgaria, what Germany and other nations have done in regard to this. They've got their people out. Why can't we here in the UK just do what the Foreign Office is meant to do and extract people if they're in a very dangerous situation?
The Foreign Office is not meant to extract people if they're in a very dangerous situation. The Foreign Office will give advice for people either to stay or to get out. And once they give advice not to travel to a country, then it's up to the nationals in the country to get out. It's only when it deteriorates to a point where there is no physical way of getting out that the UK taxpayer would consider having to dip into its back pocket and pay for people to get out. It's not something that is automatically there. So if people go into countries that are high risk or the risk evaluation changes whilst they're in there, it's on them, Gov.
Really? It's as straightforward as that?
It's as straightforward as that. And it's under exceptional circumstances that then the Foreign Office will then put flights on. They will use commercial flights if they can, first of all. They'll then charge the individuals full commercial rates for coming back on those flights to try and recoup the cost of it. And then only if it deteriorates really badly is there a non-combatant evacuation operation considered by the military to go and get people out.
So why have other countries done different things? Do they just have different policies?
They've got different policies. They've got different numbers of people that are in. They will approach things, and we will give advice to our citizens in places and let them make a grown-up decision. Other countries will turn around and say, "Get out and get out now. There's an aircraft. If you're not on it, you're on your own."
Which is a better approach, do you think?
It depends whether you want to be led by the nose or whether you want to be treated as a grown-up. The trouble is, if you tell people to get out and they don't want to go, they will turn around and accuse you of trying to nanny them and not treat people as adults. Other countries have got different cultures. The German culture is, if the state tells you to do something, you turn to the right, salute smartly, and do it. In the UK, the culture is, if the state tells you to do something, people tend to make a gesture with one or two fingers.
Well, we'll see what Lee Scott thinks about that in a second. For the meantime, Philip, thank you. Philip Ingram there, former senior military intelligence officer. Lee Scott is a Brit stranded in Israel. He's a former Conservative MP for Ilford North. He's a friend of mine. We've spoken to him on, I think, every programme I've done for the last week or so. Lee, what did you make of what Philip was saying there, and what's your situation at the moment?
Well, firstly, Peter, good evening. And,
hi there.
The situation regarding what Philip was just saying, I'd like to correct, actually, and that is that when we came to Israel, the Foreign Office had no warning not to come.
Yeah.
If they had, I would not have come.
Yeah,
we
of
would
course.
not have got on that plane.
Of course.
So it occurred while we were here,
yeah.
and immediately the airspace was closed, so we couldn't get out.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not quite a question of we made the decision to come. Everyone I know here is trying to get out. Some, in my view, have made a mistake and are trying to go through Jordan and Egypt, etc. That's fine. Every individual must decide what they want to do themselves. But for me, I do believe there's an onus on the government when you've come not knowing you're going to end up in this situation.
I agree with you, Lee. And we've heard today that the UK government is saying that it will get people out when the airspace reopens. But that could be days, could be weeks, could be months, depending on what happens in regard to Israel and Iran.
Well, what's interesting is I had the email from the government, from the Foreign Office today, telling me that we would be repatriated. Israel's airspace, there are planes coming into Ben Gurion Airport. They are now coming in.
Okay.
Ostensibly returning Israelis to Israel, but the airspace is open at certain times when they believe, obviously, it's safe enough. So I would hope that these repatriation flights will start maybe as early as tomorrow, but at latest early next week.
Well, you've no further information for you and your family who are there. I know some of your family live in Israel and will stay there, but you've no further information about when you would get out.
No, that I don't have. I mean, there's various individuals, but I actually would like to thank Peter. I'd like to thank Wes Streeting, strangely enough, the person who beat me in my parliamentary seat, but I'd like to thank Wes, he's been tremendous. I'd like to thank Neil Hudson, the MP for Epping Forest, who's been great, Priti Patel, Kenny Badnoch. I won't mention the Foreign Secretary. I'll leave that to others to mention. But I'm delighted that he's eventually now putting on these flights and doing what we need. I mean, as you know, the other day, Peter, I got injured in the attack on Tel Aviv. By chance, we happened to be out, so there was no alarm. When the alarm came, suddenly there was shrapnel, missiles landing, and I've now got my arm in bandage. Don't get me wrong, I'm not badly hurt, but nonetheless...
It's not ideal, and it's not nice, and it's not a good thing. And you just want to get home. You want to get. I
want to get home to my own country. You know, Peter, how passionately proud I am of the United Kingdom, and I just want to get home to our own country and be in my own bed and be able to sleep.
Speaking of sleeping, has sleep been better? I understand there weren't any. You didn't have to go to the shelters last night for the first time in quite a few nights.
You're right, and the strange thing was I couldn't sleep.
Really?
I am so, by my own admission, strung, wound up about everything. I just couldn't sleep last night. I sat out on the balcony just staring into space. I couldn't sleep. And then, of course, as we woke this morning, when people were getting out of bed, there was another alarm straight away.
Yeah, of course. Goodness me.
So there you go. But what the situation is here now... Obviously, missiles have been coming in again today. I know there's talk that there's going to be some sort of negotiations. I believe David Lammy and others are in Geneva, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yeah.
Meeting with Iranian officials. And for the sake of the Iranians and the Israeli people, I hope something can be done. The problem really comes down to is this was started because Israel is doing the world's dirty work for them.
Yeah,
Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Nobody's saying they should. And therefore, Israel's taken the brunt for it. And in honesty, I believe different countries should be very thankful to Israel.
Lee, thank you. We're going to go live to David Lammy, who's in Geneva. This is what he is saying about those negotiations Lee was mentioning.
To continue their talks with the United States, this is a perilous moment, and it is hugely important that we don't see regional escalation of this conflict, and indeed the issues that would cause for all of us, but also for people at home worried about cost of living at this time.
Bonjour à tous, avec mes collègues, s'il vous plaît. Avec mes collègues européens, nous sommes aujourd'hui.
Well, we heard a little bit about what David Lammy was saying there. We know those negotiations are going on with the United Kingdom involved, trying to get some sort of outline plan about what might happen. While French Minister is talking at the moment. We'll bring you the latest lines, of course, from that in a moment. We're going to go to a break now, but if David Lammy says any more, if there are any lines emerging from that, of course, we'll bring you all of that before 7 o'clock here on Talk. For the meantime, we're going to speak to Deputy TV Editor of The Sun, Felicity Cross, about the absolute meltdown at BBC Breakfast. One of their presenters, Naga Munchetti, accused of bullying and making sex jibes. We will talk about that as well. Lots more to discuss between now and 7, and of course get your views across on all of this. 0344 499 1000.
Lesson I take from my experience in this is that keeping people informed accurately and in a timely way is absolutely key, and that includes members of Parliament. I've been contacted by people that I've worked with, professional colleagues and constituents who are currently stuck in Israel, and the thing that comes across over and over again is that they're getting conflicting advice. They're being told to move to Egypt or Jordan while simultaneously being told to stay put.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch today. We'll take more calls as time goes on. We know that David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, was speaking there in Geneva. He says he doesn't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Of course, don't think that was much of a revelation. He was saying that these negotiations should continue and they want to de-escalate. Of course, a lot of the language that Keir Starmer was using, he used it to me yesterday when I spoke to him in Staffordshire as well. We'll bring you any further lines on that. But essentially, the Foreign Secretary saying Iran can't have a nuclear weapon, and it's urging Iran to continue those talks with the United States. So we will see what happens there. We'll bring you the latest on all of that as time goes on. Let's come back to the UK now and talk about BBC Breakfast. This is, the BBC, of course, has had so many scandals in recent years about Hugh Edwards, about bullying, about all sorts of people. And here's another one coming down the track. It's the front page of The Sun today. I know they're going to cover it more tomorrow as well. This is Naga Munchetty, who is the presenter of BBC Breakfast alongside Charlie State. Well, she has been hauled in by BBC bosses over allegations she bullied a junior staff member, and their allegations she made an off-air sex jibe as well. The context of all of this is that Richard Frediani, who is the boss of BBC Breakfast, well, he has taken a long period of leave because of what has happened. The comment that Naga Munchetty made was that it was described as crass, inappropriate and wildly unprofessional. The person felt embarrassed. And she was also, Naga Munchetty, rapped for the alleged bullying of a woman who was the most junior staffer. Well, let's cross to Cross now. Felicity Cross, who's the Deputy TV Editor of The Sun. Felicity, I know there's going to be more about this in the paper tomorrow. Just explain the meltdown at BBC Breakfast and why it is happening.
Well, the BBC is having to report on itself, which is never a good thing, is it? And it feels like they've been doing a lot of that over the last year or so. I think that's why there's a particular spotlight on any kind of bullying or toxic behaviour going on at the BBC, because they've had this background of course, Hugh Edwards on Strictly Come Dancing, Jermaine Janus and so on. So, I mean, this all began on Monday when we revealed that a probe had been launched into Richard Frediani's behaviour, some historic bullying claims there. And they have actually called in a consultant from PwC, an external consultant, who is actually their favourite company to turn to. They actually looked after the Hugh Edwards investigation as well. So they're back in to have a look at what's going on Breakfast. And now, as we revealed today, Naga Munchetty's been drawn into the row. Essentially what we have here is a team deeply divided. Everyone is slinging mud at each other, and now it's almost a free-for-all. We're hearing stories about everybody, about what feels like quite a toxic culture on the show. You know, be it banter, be it bullying. It feels like for a long while now they've been able to sort of get away with behaviour which isn't what you'd expect in the workplace, and especially not probably from the BBC.
Tell us about Richard Frediani and the fact that a complaint was upheld about him shaking a colleague.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
A female colleague.
Yeah, so, I mean, no workplace would that be acceptable, never mind, as I say, the BBC, which, you know, we all like to hold to a higher standard. What we do hear from him is that he is quite an old school journalist. He's not from this fluffier world of TV. So there's some people on that team who really value his approach. You know, they think he's there to get the results. Certainly they won a BAFTA earlier this year for their reporting of the post office scandal. But there's some who sort of are described as the softies, who think that you absolutely can't be bullying, shouting, you know, pushing that hard line. And I mean, I think most people would agree shaking someone, kicking a waste paper basket, which is another allegation that's been levelled at him, it isn't appropriate for the workplace. But there's certainly this divide between people who think he's just there to get results and he's a journalist, he's from the old school, and if you can't hack it, go and work somewhere else.
The BBC spokesperson, don't know if it's a man or a woman, maybe they don't either, said, while we do not comment on individual cases, we take all complaints about conduct at work extremely seriously. I mean, they do comment on individual cases, don't they? They've commented on many individual cases. They've commented on Hugh Edwards. They've commented on loads of individual cases. That's nonsense from the BBC press office, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that because the investigation is very much ongoing, and as we know, Frediani's on leave while they look into this, it's a situation where at this point they don't really know what to say. Yeah. Certainly when we went to them this week with the claims against NAGA. These were allegations which came from an incident in 2022 and then 2024. And certainly while they knew about the incidents and were able to talk to us about it, it isn't something that they're investigating. So there's no action taken against NAGA. So again, one of those where we get a bit of a fluffy response, which is just we don't comment on individuals and
if you have complaints being upheld about, for example, Richard Frediani shaking a female employee. You have a complaint that was made about Naga Munchetty bullying another employee and making this crass, inappropriate and wildly unprofessional remark that this person has alleged she has made the person felt embarrassed. You could ask, why are these people still in a job? And similarly, if this happened in almost any other workplace, would these big stars, would these senior people be protected? And I just, not in this workplace, but in another workplace, a very senior manager did say to me one time, we were dealing with a nightmare presenter, I should say not at this station, at a different station. The manager did say to me over a pint one time that there's one rule for presenters and one rule for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a question that we're going to be asking in the weeks to come. You know, we're just unpicking through the different allegations we're hearing. Certainly, we're hearing from a lot of people that work on BBC Breakfast and across the BBC who, you know, are pleased that the spotlight's now been shining on this behaviour. But you're right, people are already talking about double standards. You know, we know that, for example, from Wyn Evans, who lost his job on BBC Radio Wales because of the comments that were made during Strictly Come Dancing, which he's since spoken to The Sun about and explained the joke behind it. It wasn't how it first seemed. He lost his job. But then we have Naga, who is making a sexual remark and obviously remained in her role. So, you know, one rule for presenters, one rule for women and men potentially. So don't worry, it's absolutely something we're going to be looking into. And
so more in the paper tomorrow, more in the Sun tomorrow from you, Felicity?
Yeah, so we're looking at sort of how the expose this week has landed, because as I say, it's landed with quite a thud. There's a chasm now in that divided workplace, you know, almost these two camps between the different presenters and Richard Frediani. So lots more to come on this, I think, because a lot of people are glad that finally they feel like they're having their say.
Felicity, thank you so much. Appreciate all of that. Felicity Cross, the Deputy TV Editor of The Sun, joining us there. Jane's been in touch, says, I've never watched BBC Breakfast, don't care what happens to the BBC. The sooner the licence fee is scrapped, the better. And someone's been in touch calling himself Winston Smith. I don't think that's really your name. Although maybe you were born in 1984, I don't know. I know it's not a laughing matter, says this person, but if Lamy is doing negotiations with Iran, he's probably offered them Israel and a few trillion quid. The man is a clown, says that person. We'll have lots more about what's in The Sun tomorrow. In fact, we're going to talk to their night news editor. John is with us. John Lucas will be with us in a second, telling us about all the revelations, all the exclusive stories that are coming up in your copy of The Sun tomorrow, including the latest wine from Meghan Markle. Not a wine, W-H-I-N-E, but a wine that you can drink. Honestly, it is how she has described it is. Let me see. Someone sent me a message earlier about how she has described this wine. It's a rosé wine, and it is just something that she's relaunching her as ever rule. It is a wine enthused with joy and whimsy. Well, we'll be enthused with joy and whimsy, talking about it in just a second. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, lots to discuss here on Talk. Be sure to get your comments on the air between now and 7 in the next 26 and a half minutes. I will be glad to hear them. 0344 499 1000. Kevin O'Sullivan coming up in this chair between 7 and 9, and he will as well be on what just happened between 9 and 10. For the meantime, let's find out what's going to be in your copy of The Sun tomorrow with John Lucas, who is the night news editor at The Sun. John, it's great to see you. Very busy news day today, isn't it?
Proper newsy day today, yeah. It's been non-stop, yeah.
Certainly lots about the Middle East and Israel. We've been hearing from the Foreign Secretary and Celebrity Mastermind contestant David Lammy a minute ago. What is in the paper about these pro-Palestinian idiots who broke into the country's biggest air base? How should they be treated?
Well, yeah, it's extraordinary. It's almost as if we're not on the cusp of World War III, or at least a big, not want to scaremonger your listeners, but
it's a dangerous time.
A big conflict. You'd think that, in my mind, our air bases are very heavily guarded places, and we're looking at this today, and it seems that any moron with a scooter and a can of red spray paint can simply climb over the fence, get in there,
film themselves
doing it, and attack these planes. So we've had defence sources tell us that the cost of this could be millions. Depends on where this paint might have got into, because obviously everything's going to have a full, absolute top to bottom clean. And the other, obviously, potential security breach here was that they didn't actually touch this plane, but a plane next to it, next to the ones they did touch, is actually used by the royal family and the Prime Minister on occasion to fly in and out of the country.
The royal flight, yeah.
Huge security risk. Yeah. It's very embarrassing for the RAF, but the point is, we've got, we're in very tense times, and we've got these idiots running around. This group, Palestine Action, have been involved in many other actions against things and companies linked to Israel. Also today, it's just sort of gone under the radar, but they did a similar stunt at branches of Allianz today, because that company,
the insurance company,
yeah, because it invests in an Israeli defence firm. Right. But they've also done other things where people have actually been hurt during these actions. So that's why we think that it is a realistic prospect. We think that they might become a proscribed.
Well, we've certainly heard that the Home Secretary probably going to do that on Monday. It'll be really interesting. And of course, they could use terrorism legislation to prosecute them. And of course, I'm sure you've been talking to a lot of MPs and so on. I mean, what do they think should happen?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, there's not many people sort of willing to speak out in defence of these people.
Of course,
today.
yeah.
I mean, obviously we're a democracy. We're Great Britain. We love protest to a degree. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, free speech. We're the home of free speech, but within the law.
Yeah, and also speech is speech. It doesn't involve going onto a military base. Anything could have happened. They could have been shot. Innocent people could have been hurt in the crossfire of something like that. They could damage the craft. That is the sort of line, really.
Yeah. Anna's been in touch from Surrey on text 87222 with the word talk in her text. She said, I worked at RAF Oldham, O-D-I-H-A-M, how do you pronounce it? Oldham, it's Oldham, sorry, she spelled that correctly. I worked at RAF Oldham for 18 months. Nobody ever asked me who I was or asked for ID. I could have been 20 feet away from a Chinook. Well, I can say that I've actually been on the Royal flight. I've flown on the Oldham in Hampshire, apologies. I've been on the Royal flight myself when I was a special advisor a few years ago, flew between Belfast and London on the Royal flight on that particular RAF aircraft, and there was very, very tight security there. We're talking about free speech, we're talking about protests, we're talking about people airing their views. One person I'd be very happy to never hear from again is Meghan Sussex, the Duchess of Sussex. She has now said that she's releasing a rosé wine enthused with joy and whimsy. I'm sure you're enthused with joy and whimsy to hear this, John.
Sounds lovely. So, look, good luck to her. She's relaunched this As Ever brand, because she did it before, and apparently everything sold out very, very quickly. Not sure
how much of it there actually was.
Exactly how much product there was. But yeah, so she's relaunching it. The flagship thing is now she's moving into booze, so she's going to have this rosé. It's brewed from the Napa Valley in California. Not quite sure of the price.
It's not going to be cheap, John, is it?
Yeah, no, it's described as it's infused with joy, love and a touch of whimsy. Plus, it has soft notes of stone fruit and gentle minerality.
What?
Yeah, it's vomit-inducing, and that's before.
As is she.
That's before you've even started drinking the stuff. And you're going to have the £9 apricot spread. That comes in a keepsake packaging of $14, and a blossom honey for £28 if you fancy it. I mean, good luck to her. Look, if she's listening, we'll still have samples on the Sun News desk. We're more than happy to try it, but yeah, that's Megan's big.
Yeah, I'm sure Kevin O'Sullivan will be talking about this after 7 o'clock. I can almost guarantee that. Let me tell you. Let's talk about the rule of law. Great headline there. The Wagatha Christie libel fight between Colleen Rooney and Rebecca Vardy is going to make legal history.
Yeah, well, everyone knows this story. So, you know, very quick recap. It's where Colleen Rooney caught out Rebecca Vardy as the leaker of her personal secrets, and turns out everyone's still going to actually know about this case in hundreds of years potentially, because it can now be cited as case law. So there was this extraordinary bit during the trial where Rebecca Vardy's assistant was accused of leaking to the media, but it couldn't be proved in court because weirdly her phone had fallen off a boat.
The side of a boat, yeah.
In the North Sea.
Yeah.
And couldn't be recovered.
Has that never happened to you, John? Have you never had your phone?
Not yet, but I mean it always could do, because it seems to be a very plausible thing to happen. And there's been a case, it's an inheritance dispute, and this case has been cited in that because one of the parties couldn't produce messages which they claimed proved that they should be entitled to some of the money. So yeah, Rooney versus Vardy is now case law, and people in 100 years' time are still going to know about this.
That's great. I mean, it was fascinating. I remember watching a documentary about it, a very, very good one, certainly. Champagne Superbluter. I mean, first of all, actually, before we come to Champagne Superbluter, who originally called it Wagatha Christie? Was it one of your headline writers?
I think, you know, there are so many people who claim
yes,
to have come up
with Wagatha Christie.
I wouldn't like to say the wrong name, because then there's going to be someone really senior who says, no, that was me. But I think there are a few people come up with it. But we take the credit for it as the Sun.
Of course, of course. Well, I mean, the best puns in the country are in the Sun. There's no doubt about that. Including Champagne Superbluter. Oasis fans snapped on the new Adidas merchandise, but the ones for people who are generously proportioned, I declare my interest, have sold out. 2XL, 3XL and 4XL t-shirts gone.
Yeah. We had a lot of fun with this. So Oasis really have got the biggest fans. They've also got this massive global tour coming up.
Yes.
And they've done this collaboration with Adidas. I don't know if you've seen, if your listeners have a Google of Liam Gallagher in some of this stuff, it's a bit not to my taste. There's a whole sort of pink tracksuit thing, but people love it. And
are you someone who wouldn't enjoy wearing a pink tracksuit, John? Really?
I thought I could try and pull it off.
You could wear a pink tracksuit on a boat in the North Sea, losing your phone, drinking some of Megan's wine. I think it would suit you very well.
Combine the whole thing, yeah.
The whole thing.
This actually sounds like a great weekend plan, if I can get away with it. But yeah, so they've all this stuff came out on Friday, and yeah, the 2XL, 3XL and 4XL have sold out instantly. Now, the massive irony about this is that as part of the tour planning, Edinburgh Council had put out this notice to local boozers saying, you need to plan, because when you're thinking about the capacity of your venue, middle-aged men, which weirdly make up a lot of Oasis fans.
Yeah, well, they were there the first time round, weren't they?
Yeah, it says take up a lot more space than everybody else. And Liam Gallagher kicked off about this, and he said, I've heard what you said about Oasis fans, and quite, you know, your attitude stinks. He might have thrown a few more Liam-style words in there.
Yeah.
And, yeah, he blasted them, but it turns out they may have been right. We had a few others. Some Might Weigh.
I like it.
Wonder Whale. Pork Tonight. There was quite a choice. I don't know what it will actually be in the paper, but
okay, the best one, no doubt. Well, we look forward to all of that tomorrow in the Sun. John, thanks very much indeed. That's John Lucas there. He's the night news editor of the Sun. Thanks to you as well. Paul in Oxford says, has Megan made the wine from the unsold jam diluted down and put into the bottles? She might have, but Paul, one of our producers here, Samara, did try to. I think she actually successfully got a jar of the jam, but it took an awful lot of work in order to do so. On the arguably slightly more important matter of World War III. Someone has texted me to say, if we are heading for war, we're in big trouble, having the worst government in our history. And Peter in Croydon says there's no love lost between Charlie State and Naga Munchetty. Apparently Charlie voted Naga off the weakest link, even though she was one of the strongest links. Apparently she was not happy. It was brilliant, says Peter. Love it. I'm a bit like Pam in Gavin and Stacey. It's all the drama. I just love it. In a minute, we're going to take your calls. We're also going to talk to Kevin O'Sullivan. He'll be here between 7 and 9 in this studio, and then with what just happened between 9 and 10. Loads to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk.
The support from the British government, got nothing. I've registered on everything I meant to. I haven't had anything at all. No guidance. All right, the only guidance we have been given is obviously to make our way to the Jordan or Egyptian border. I'm a 16-year-old woman here on my own. How am I going to do that? I've got an 8-month pregnant daughter, young children. She's not going to get me there. I just feel that we are about the only country in the world that government have just left us here in what's known as the war zone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Marge has been in touch and says, why the need to discuss everything that Meghan does miles away in the UK? We have the royals at Ascot, we have Princess Catherine off due to her recovery, and we wish her well, of course. So much yet you choose to pull up Meghan's name. Well, listen, I think people are interested in what Meghan Markle says and does. She is someone who people react to. It is a legitimate news story. It's in the Sun tomorrow. People want to read about it, certainly, and Kevin will be covering that story. May not be of particular interest to you, Marge, necessarily, and that's fine. I would honestly say, as a journalist, I'm probably less interested in the royals than maybe other people are, maybe some other journalists, maybe even some other presenters at the station, but it doesn't mean that they're not news. What is definitely news, and hopefully Marge would agree with me on this, is that the UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy has been in Geneva at these talks in regard to what is happening in the Middle East. He has said that we were clear Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He added that his foreign his fellow European foreign ministers are keen to continue ongoing discussions and negotiations with Iran. We urge Iran to continue the talks with the United States, says Lamy, adding, this is a perilous moment. It's hugely important we don't see a regional escalation of the conflict between Iran and Israel. Those are the views of the Foreign Secretary, David Lamy. What are your views on all of this? 0344 499 1000. To my knowledge, he hasn't said anything, although presumably it would be John Healey, the Defence Secretary, in regard to what happened at RAF Brize Norton. Major security breach there. Dean in Gloucestershire has some thoughts on this. Dean, what would you like to say? You're very welcome to the programme.
Yeah, hi Peter, first time caller.
Great to hear from you, Dean. You're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you. He actually serves with the King's Colour Squadron in London.
Okay.
And I discussed it with him today about this, at Brize Norton, because I've actually taken him there to fly out to on where he has to go. And he said to me he can't understand how they actually got in, because it's a real strict security. I know.
Well, I'm not surprised your son says that, Dean. I mean, I've been to Brize Norton. I've been on the Royal Flight, as I said previously. I was on it a couple of times through work. I had to, couldn't fly commercially because of the sensitivity of things and also timings. And Brize Norton is a very secure place, but clearly not last night.
Clearly not, and like I said, from what he said, all the spotlight is now on him. He's just recently been promoted to corporal because he's only 22.
Good for him. Congratulations to him.
We're all proud of him as a family.
Of course.
And he's recently come back from a stint in Iraq, and times I'd rang him, or he'd rang me, sorry, and he'd say, "Dad, I have to go because the mortars were actually coming over the fence." This was a shared base with the Americans. Mm-hmm. And just touching on another thing with the armed forces, I'd just like to add, he always mentioned to me how well the Americans were well kitted out. They had everything compared to them, and it just goes to show what this government thinks of our armed forces.
Well, there's so many servicemen and women, Dean, who just have mentioned that to me before. They've said it on this programme. They've said it. Their families have said it as well. And that, I mean, you're very proud of your son, and rightly so, Dean, and that promotion to corporal is a very impressive thing. What is less impressive, as you say, is the MOD not actually kitting them out properly. And I wonder, with the more money that's going in to the Defence Forces, are you confident that things are going to get better as your son progresses in his career?
I don't hold off much confidence for that, Peter, to be honest with you. My father was he was served in World War II, and he was in Burma, and so it's in the family. Though I didn't serve, I'm really glad that my son did, but I just don't see it from the way this government is. I mean, to be honest with you, Starmer, Lamy, Cooper, Rayner, I think they're a disgrace to the country. I really don't hold much hope for that.
Some might argue Yvette Cooper, she's moved now with Palestine Action. She said she's going to prescribe them and make a membership of even the organisation a criminal offence. Is that some progress here, maybe?
Look, I mean, I think it's just platitudes, to be honest with you. The proof's in the pudding. I don't see it. I don't see, having regular calls to my son. I don't see it when he's home. I don't see it. I'm just comparing our armed forces to other armed forces, and not only that, the veterans as well. So my, the way I'm thinking of it, as he progresses through his future in the RAF. What's it going to be like when he comes to finish, and what's left?
Well, our veterans need to be treated far better than they are treated, and even people who are in the military and all branches of the military, the RAF, the Army, the Marines as well, of course, and the Navy, some of their accommodation is just dreadful, and hopefully things will get better for them. But it is, I just think the MOD is an organisation in crisis. I think there are an awful lot of things that they should do that they don't do. But Dean, how did it feel when you saw him qualify and pass? Do they call it passing out in the RAF? I know they do in the Army.
Yeah. And unfortunately, Peter, when he did pass out, it was COVID. So
okay,
we could do. I couldn't go because of obviously the reasons beyond that, and
of course,
it was just the fact that we had to watch it virtually over the internet. But yeah, super proud of him. He's doing really well, and just to add a note that on Monday he's going to be. He's been selected to raise the flag at Parliament to mark the start of Armed Forces Week.
Wow, that's very cool.
And then he's going to have a reception with some of the ministers later. But I'm sure he'd like to say some choice words, but as I know he's such a good lad, I'm sure he'll hold it back. But it's just my frustration with this particular government and where we go. Could get me going on all sorts of things, to be honest with you, Peter. But
well, listen, anytime you want to give me a ring, you give me a ring, Dean, because if there's something you want to get off your chest, you just let me know. But there's some negatives, obviously, in terms of what you're talking about, but what is absolutely shining through, probably as brightly as the buttons on his tunic, is your pride in your son. And I hope he has a really, really good day on Monday raising that flag, and good for him for doing so. Dean, I really appreciate you giving me a call, and thanks, and all the very, very best to you and your family, and to your son as well, especially on Monday raising the flag there. 22 years old, he's clearly done very, very well. Rachel says sack David Lammy, and Robert says, dear Mr Cardwell, Munchetti and State interviewed a government minister on their programme before the general election. They were both very rude, openly mocking his decision to appear with our national flag. I remember that, it was a while ago. I would have sacked them both on the spot. A pity nobody did. We would not have this trouble with them now. How disappointing for the real journalists to have to witness such behaviour, says Robert Hensher. Robert, I remember that story. I can't remember which government minister it was or which MP it was who was in front of the flag, and I kept asking him over and over again, why are you in front of the flag? Why have you got a flag behind you? I think it might have been Robert Jenrick, actually, but Ryan, the producer, is just checking as we speak. I'll come back to that in a second. Let's speak in the meantime to Mark in Lincolnshire about Brize Norton. Mark, what are your thoughts on this?
Hi there, Peter. It all smells a bit fishy to me, all of this, if I'm honest.
I mean, I just don't know how they got in. I just think, how on earth were they able to penetrate the security?
Well, I don't like going down conspiracy theories, but I cannot believe for 1 second that you have what is essentially an active live runway that's got actual planes on there that are going to be, I presume, in use that day for some purpose, hence why they're not in hangars, or at least covered up at the very least. So they're obviously on the tarmac, part of the tarmac, ready for that for the day ahead.
Yeah.
And there's literally nobody about.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they did it quite quickly, but I mean, it is just how they got in, how they were allowed to do it, and that will take some really, really expensive equipment, really expensive planes out of action for some time, as we were hearing earlier on. They're all going to need a thorough clean and examination of everything they're doing, because if you get a substance, even like paint, into a fuselage in some way, into an engine in some way, well, that could have devastating consequences.
100%, Peter. I mean, those... potentially looking at having to replace the entire engines.
Yeah.
Something like that,
Well, they should be charged for that. The people who did this, they should be charged with criminal charges.
I mean, the thing is as well, I mean, I don't know whether they've actually arrested anybody. I don't think they have they?
No, they haven't so far, that we've heard of anyway.
There is absolutely nothing stopping them, because this is part of the group, Palestine Action, whatever.
Well, the group's got to be prescribed, Mark, and maybe that will stop them. Maybe people might think twice about being members of that organisation.
Well, go after the leadership, Peter, at the end of the day.
Yeah.
If you can't find the people that actually did this thing, then you essentially charge them instead.
Well, I think they'll be able to. I think there'll be a lot of the digital footprint. They put it online as well. Just to clarify, my memory was correct, which is great. It was Robert Jenrick, who was on BBC Breakfast when that person was talking about previously, who messaged in there. It was Robert Jenrick. Robert, I think, was actually the name of the person who texted in, and was talking about Robert Jenrick. He was in front of some Union flags, and he was mocked by Charlie State, and Naga Munchetti kept asking him over and over again why he was the government minister's flag. It was actually 2021. It was quite a while. Charlie State drew attention to the size of the then Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick's Union flag during an interview, and the BBC said it was meant as a light-hearted, off-the-cuff comment with no offence or disrespect was intended. And Munchetti later apologised for liking offensive tweets about the exchange. He liked things on Twitter. I mean, honestly, these people, they just need to take a long, hard look at themselves. I really think so. Thank you to Sazzle, who says, I love listening to you, Peter, but I'm seriously worried about your addiction to fizzy drinks, cakes and chocolate. Eat broccoli, it's much healthier. I promise you I had some broccoli yesterday. It was part of my dinner yesterday. I do try to eat healthily, but of course, doesn't always happen. And regarding puns, Mike says, shame Meghan isn't doing a bubbly, then she could have called it Meghan Sparkle.
Do you know the story of broccoli?
Tell me.
It was invented.
No, it wasn't.
By the family.
Broccoli?
It was, yeah. It's a cross between cauliflower and cabbage.
Right.
And it was invented by the family, like the parents or the grandparents in California, of the original producer, the creator of the James Bond.
Cubby Broccoli.
Cubby Broccoli.
So they created it?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
That's why it's called broccoli.
That's amazing.
There you go.
Goodness me.
You learn something of it. And that's what I'm leading my show on.
For the main story tonight.
Yeah.
Tell me, are you enthused with Joy and Whimsy? Kev, over Meghan Markle's new rosé.
Honestly, she's been
her...
teasing that like crazy. So it's literally on Instagram. 2 sleeps till the big reveal.
2 sleeps till the big
reveal. And we knew about it already, Chateau. We knew about this for weeks. That's all it is. And by the way, it's gone on sale. It's not selling.
It's not selling? How much can you get it for?
It's I think it's like, what is it, $30 or something?
Okay.
It's quite expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
And I ordered, or my show ordered, the jam and the cookie mix and all that. So this is average product you can buy